All right. Wonderful. Well, good morning. It is 10:26 and my name is Katrina Salazar. I would like to welcome everyone here at the California Board of Accountancy offices to the March Board of Accountancy meeting. I would also like to thank those following us online via WebEx for participating with us in that manner. I would like to start the meeting by acknowledging that we have the reappointment of several valuable members of our board. You guys are all valuable, but I am happy to say and acknowledge that Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines, Ariel Pei, and Joe Rosenbaum have been reappointed, and so we are excited and thank you for your past work and look forward to your future work. So I would also like to pause and welcome a new face at our board table. So I do want to share with everyone that we are welcoming a new member, Tony Lin. Mr. Lin was recently appointed by Governor Newsom, and that happened recently, only on February of this year. And I'm going to share a little bit of information with you about Mr. Lin. He is a first-generation Chinese-American immigrant, proud Californian, and entrepreneur dedicated to serving in his community. Mr. Lin has been president of Talis Design Corporation since 2011, where he successfully developed and managed numerous restaurant and business operations. Mr. Lin comes to our Board of Accountancy with experience as a member of the Elk Grove Planning Commission, and he is currently also the CEO for the Asian Pacific Islander American Public Affairs Association, also known as APAPA. And that's a national nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing the AAPI communities through leadership and civic engagements with 43 chapters across our country. So Mr. Lin has been pursuing a strong interest to give back to the community, has mentored and supported hundreds of student interns and young business professionals, and hope that you will join me in welcoming Tony to our board. So with that, we are ready to then move along in our agenda. The next item on our agenda is the national, oh, I am so sorry. Yes, I got so excited about this. I forgot that we do have some initial items that I get to talk about. I guess I go through all of them. Right in order, good time. So I would like to remind folks that we do have some processes and we will go through the administration of that. So when it comes to the topic of taking public comment, so the board has provided the opportunity for public comment via the WebEx platform. When we do take those public comments, we will start with taking public comment from those individuals that are here in person in the Sacramento board meeting room. I will then ask the moderator to open up the lines of WebEx for public comment. If you are on WebEx, you will be allotted up to 5 minutes for your public comment. Thank you. So with that, I believe we've taken care of the administrative portion, and I would like to turn this over to Ms. Reed to establish a quorum for us. Thank you.
Nancy Corrigan.
Nancy Corrigan, present.
Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines.
Present.
Christian Lotta.
Present.
Tony Lin.
Present.
Ariel Pei.
Present.
Joe Rosenbaum.
Present.
Katrina Salazar.
Present.
Michael Savoy.
Present.
Yen Tu.
Present.
And Evangeline Ward.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. I appreciate that. And as we always do, it's important for us to reiterate our mission statement for both our board members as well as those who are following us online. The board's mission is to protect consumers by ensuring that only qualified licensees practice public accountancy in accordance with established professional standards. This mission is derived from the statutory requirement that protection of the public shall be the highest priority for the California Board of Accountancy in exercising its licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary functions. Whenever the protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. So thank you for listening to the mission statement and to our board members with keeping that always top of mind. And as we go through our meetings, I know we have a lot of materials on our desks. Be sure to pull your microphone close to you when you speak and be sure that the green button is on. And for those following online, I will remind them that you will see board members with devices open. That is because they are utilizing electronic versions of the materials as opposed to printed copies. And so that is the reason you may see that. You may see people interacting with devices is for the board materials. All right. Now with that, I believe that conducts our administration portion of the meeting and we are ready to move along with the agenda. And so now I get to come back to item B, which is the National Association of State Boards, but I have missed one, as we said. Let me go back to my agenda and say, prior to opening this up, I would like to request any public comments regarding the agenda that we are about to embark upon. Seeing no public comments here in person, I would like to ask our moderator to please open up the WebEx for public comments there.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click the question mark inside of the square, typically located bottom right corner of your WebEx screen, and type, I would like to make a comment, or simply comment in the text field and make sure it goes to all panelists before clicking the send button. If you called in via a phone, you can press *3 to raise your virtual hand to be called on. At this time, I see no request for public comments through the Q&A or raised hand feature. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, moderator, please close Q&A. All right, with that, we have addressed agenda item. I am firmly following the agenda item number 1 and moving on to report of the president. I appreciate the indulgence in allowing me to enthusiastically appreciate our members and welcome our new member, Tony Lynn, to the meeting, slightly out of order. So we have handled item 1A. Next is item 1B, which is the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy Committee form, interest form, and that is available. We do have some materials on that. Please hold. Okay. And that is item 2B. And for item 2B, this is to provide members of our board with information regarding opportunities to serve an organization referred to frequently here as NASBA. The full name is the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. So NASBA has each year announces its interest in seeking volunteer applications, and this is for the 23-24 year. There is an online committee interest form that is due completed to NASBA no later than May 5th. So there is a fairly lengthy open application period. This packet of materials includes an overview with the time commitment for participation on NASBA committees. And it's important to note that the GCA's Office of Professional Examination Services has reviewed NASBA's committees for the year and would like to point out that they do not believe that service on these committees would create a conflict of interest for our board members. So we appreciate your attention to the conflict of interest concerns. I would also note that if we have members that are currently serving on a NASBA committee, these appointments are annual. So if you are interested in continuing to serve, you must reapply. And to ensure that staff are tracking our board members' interest in service, please email Ms. Rebecca Reed, our board relations analyst, when you submit an interest form and provide her the committees that you are seeking appointment to. So if you have any questions regarding NASBA committees, you're encouraged to please contact Ms. Reed, our board relations analyst. Thank you. Do we need to take public comment on that? Okay. So are there any comments, questions from the board on that item? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item? Seeing no public comment in person, I would like to ask our moderator to please open up the WebEx platform for public comment.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is open. The instructions are on the screen. Click that question mark, type comments, send to all panelists. For those calling in, *3 to raise your hand. No requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Please do. Yes, I have a question.
I'm a little delayed in raising my hand, but I just applied last year for the communication committee of NASBA and been to a couple of meetings now. I know Ms. Reed and Ms. Colligan and also Ms. Salazar has been involved and on board of the NASBA board. I just encourage my colleague to get on the committee if you have the time and the interest to do so, because it is very fascinating to learn more, have information, and be able to be at the table. We are one of the largest CBA in the country. It is good for us to have a voice at the table.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you so much for adding that commentary. I do appreciate the encouragement, and we do have additional board members that have participated, Mr. Savoy as well. So we're happy to be resources and look forward to the staff providing support for you and encouraging you to participate. So with that, we will move past item 2B. Thank you. The next item is 2C, which is the resolution for our retiring Enforcement Advisory Committee member, Nathan Crowley, CPA. Mr. Crowley has served on the Enforcement Advisory Committee since March 25th of 2001, and his term will end at the end of this month, March 31st, 2023. May I request a motion to accept the resolution for Mr. Crowley? Okay, we do have a first from Board Member Pei. Do I see a second? We have a second from Board Member Hines, who beat you to it. Thank you very much. All right. Any comments or discussion? Okay. Any public comments or discussion? Seeing none in person here, I would like to ask the moderator to please open up WebEx for public comment online.
This is the moderator. The WebEx Q&A is open. Instructions on the screen. Click that question mark, type comments, send to all panelists. If you'd like to participate, you're calling in, press *3. No request. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, moderator. Thank you for closing that. All right. So with that, I believe we're ready to move along, and I would like to request that Ms. Reed call for the vote.
Nancy Corrigan? Yes. Carrie Ann Farrell Hines? Yes. Christian Lotta? Yes. Tony Lin?
Yes.
Ariel Pei?
Yes.
Joe Rosenbaum?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Yen Tu?
Yes.
And Evangeline Ward?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Crowley, for your service. So the next agenda item D is the resolution for our Retiring Qualifications Committee member, Jose Palma, CPA. Mr. Palma has served on the Qualifications Committee since March 30th, 2015, and his term will end March 31st of 2023. May I have a motion to accept the resolution? All right, we have a first from Board Member Chu.
Second.
And we have a second from Board Member Savoy. Thank you very much. Comments, discussion from the board? Hearing none, is there any in-person comments in the headquarters meeting room? Seeing none, I would like to ask our moderator to please open up the WebEx for public comment.
The Q&A is now open. Instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click that question mark, type comment, click send, or press *3 from your phone. No requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, moderator. Thank you. All right. With that, I would like to turn this over to Ms. Rebecca Reed to call for the vote, please.
Evangeline Ward?
Yes.
Yan Tu?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Joe Rosenbaum?
Yes.
Errol Pay?
Yes.
Tony Lynn?
Yes.
Christian Lotta?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines?
Yes.
And Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, and we appreciate Mr. Palma's service. The next agenda item, I am going to propose that we take the 3 resolutions together. Items 2E through 2G are the resolutions for the following retired consideration of the CPA Experience Requirements Task Force, also known as CERT. And these members are Dan Dustin, CPA, David Centony, PhD, CPA, and Rich Simidian, CPA. As you may know, the CERT completed its work at the recent January 26, 2023 CERT meeting. May I get a motion to accept these 3 resolutions? We have a first from Board Member Hines.
So moved.
And I have a second, actually, from Board Member Lata, who moved very quickly.
I second.
Thank you for that second. Any comments? Seeing no comments or discussions from our board, I would like to ask for any public comments for those in person. Seeing no public comments, I would like to ask our moderator to please open the WebEx portal for public comment.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is open in WebEx. The instructions are on the screen. You can click the question mark, type comments, send to all panelists, or raise your hand by pressing *3 from your phone. No requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please. All right, thank you. With that, I would like to turn it back to Ms. Rebecca Reed to call for the vote.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines? Yes. Christian Lotta?
Yes.
Tony Lynn?
Yes.
Errol Pay?
Yes.
Joe Rosenbaum?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Yan Tu?
Yes.
And Evangeline Ward?
Yes.
And Nancy Corrigan? Yes. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you to Mr. Dustin, Centony, and Simidian for your service to CERT and the Board of Accountancy. All right, the next item, 2H, is the overview of the Peer Review Oversight Committee's annual administrative site visit process. And I would like to welcome Michelle Center, our Chief of the Licensing Division, to the table.
Thank you, President Salazar. The purpose of this agenda item is to present to the board an overview of the peer review. Trying to decide what I need down here is to present to the board an overview of the Peer Review Oversight Committee, or PROC, administrative site visit process. This agenda item provides information that may be helpful when discussing agenda item 2I. The purpose of the administrative site visit, or ASV, is to determine if the administrating entity, which is CalCPA in California, is administering the peer reviews in accordance with the standards adopted by the board. Specifically, the PROC conducts the ASV in accordance with California Code of Regulations sections 47, 48, and 48.3, which are attached for your reference in your item. The PROC begins planning the ASV at their May meeting. 2 PROC members are assigned to the ASV team, and they work with staff and the CalCPA to establish a schedule for their visit. The actual site visit usually occurs between September and November, and the team discusses and reviews existing and new peer review related policies, statistics, and a sampling of peer reviews from California firms. The samples include reviews of firms that received a peer review rating of pass, pass with deficiencies, and fail. The ASV team uses the administrative site visit summary checklist when performing the ASV. The questions on the checklist were derived directly from the California Code of Regulations. The checklist allows the PROC to verify that all necessary oversight activities were completed, determine if the administering entity is administering the California peer review program in accordance with standards adopted by the board, and provide a summary report to this board. Prior to the pandemic, PROC members traveled to the Cal CPA headquarters in Burlingame, California to perform the ASV. As a result of the pandemic, the ASV moved to a virtual setting. PROC members and Cal CPA staff agreed that the virtual setting saved them a considerable amount of time and was actually preferable as we move forward. Staff is me. I attended the ASV in 2021. The purpose of my participation was to observe the PROC members and monitor that they're carrying out their functions as directed by the board and in accordance with relevant statutes and regulations. Additionally, relying solely on PROC leads creates a key person dependence, lack of consistency in these site visits, and an inability for staff to validate that the critical parts of the peer review program are being conducted as directed by this board. That concludes my presentation, but before I turn it back over, I do want to recognize PROC member Jeffrey DeLizer. Mr. DeLizer led the last ASV visit, which was the one in 2021 that I attended. So if you have technical questions or any questions regarding what he thought of my attendance, feel free to also direct those to Mr. DeLizer. Thank you, President Salazar.
All right, thank you for that presentation, Michelle Center. Board comments or questions for Ms. Center on the materials provided? Ms. Hines?
So this is related to the next item. So I'm wondering from council the extent to which we can talk about, because they're related, the extent to which we can talk about, issues. I'm seeing some nodding of heads, and so then maybe I should defer my questions until the next item.
Yeah, and I think this is more to ask questions about the regulations and the ASV presentation in terms of checklist. And we have a comment from Ms. Corrigan.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Center. But, and I'm reading in here, and I kind of went through this fairly thoroughly on the page 2 of 3 about how information is strictly confidential and has never resulted in any adverse action with regard to enforcement. And I just kind of want to clarify that, in fact, these findings or observations or whatever aren't even reported to enforcement. They are part of the oversight process. Is that correct?
So we have not, in my knowledge, ever reported something to enforcement. That being said, I believe I would have an obligation to report something if something were found. I would not anticipate that to occur because our already existing processes already allow for that. But I do not believe that I or anyone would have a gag kind of order, if you will, for things that I might see as part of that process.
Perhaps maybe that's part of the concern on the part of the AICPA, or can you expand further, Mr. Franzella?
Sure, I'll try my best if that's okay, President Salazar. So the staff function isn't there to look and find issues related to a particular firm's peer review and whether or not it was done if that particular peer review had findings or concerns that needed to be an enforcement referral. That the board has already set up and segregated out in a very different manner. That manner is such that if you have a failed peer review, it's required to be submitted to the board, and the board can perform its own investigation. On top of the firm needing to do it, the AICPA has an obligation to also report those failed peer reviews to the board. So the mechanism for enforcement's involvement in peer review is already set out in other areas. the administrative site visit is really there, as Ms. Center has kind of highlighted, to the fact of we are there to help and aid the PROC subcommittee, that group who's there doing it. We're also there observing their role and their function. Staff also have a unique input in that process as well, because staff live with peer review on a daily basis, dealing with things that come through with renewal, questions, concerns, things that are being reported to the staff that can also supplement information for the ASV. Staff are not there to look at prized confidential information in any way with the express purposes of turning that into an enforcement referral.
Thank you. We have another question, Ms. Hines.
Yeah, I actually have a couple of questions. One of them is, this is the only time that CBA staff, has participated in the ASV, right? And so was there something that precipitated, staff attending when that hadn't been the case before? Or I'll let you answer that first.
You are correct. That was the first time. I think it would be inaccurate to assume that that was not something that we wanted to do before that. I think that staff had a general recognition that we were not getting access to enough information to make us feel comfortable that we could have an opinion about the peer review program, whether that be the ASV, whether that be statistics, and that sort of thing. So I think it really was just that was when we decided that we would participate, not necessarily that something specifically happened during that year that caused us to insert ourselves.
So just to summarize, to be clear, there was a pattern and a practice of incidents and behavior that had occurred over the years associated with the peer review process that raised concerns with the CBA staff about the process that sort of initiated that request to participate in person, that desire to do some additional research, do some additional evaluation of that process to, address or alleviate any concerns that may have existed.
I would say that is correct, but to clarify, it wasn't concerns from staff that anything necessarily was wrong with the peer review process, that they were not following law. There was nothing of that extent. It was more of a we don't really know because we are denied access.
Any comments? All right, and Dominic, would you like to add?
Yes, just briefly. One of the things that staff have routinely done for the other committees, QC, EAC, and we do it for the PROC, is we do evaluations for each of the members for appointment and reappointment. And some of what we factor into is our engagement with those members and how they perform their functions. And one area we had no real kind of exposure to and ensuring that the board's direction is being carried out appropriately was the administrative site visit. We relied solely, and this board was solely dependent on PROC members to perform that function. And while they do an amazing job and an excellent job, we've also had turnover on that committee. We've had at times trying to recruit and keep members on that committee that staff had made some determinations that it was of importance to this board that staff become more involved and be a part of that process and making sure that the members are carrying out the board's vision and expectations. And the only way staff can do that in what is obviously the most important function of the PROC was being part of that process. And during the pandemic, it provided us that opportunity that we hadn't previously had because it was being done remotely as opposed to staff having to arrange and work through that process and going down to Cal CPA headquarters at the time. So I think there was a confluence of a number of things. And as our letter pointed out, there were other issues that were permeating within the AICPA peer review program that staff wanted to get exposure to. So I think those are kind of how we ended up in that environment.
All right. So seeing no more questions. Oh, we have one more, Ms. Hines.
Yeah, another question about, thank you for that. That was helpful. I had another question about, there was the issue raised about confidentiality, the concern about the confidentiality of the materials. And so it noted in your report that the information is not redacted. And, you know, as we are trying to problem solve this and figure out how we can strike a good balance, you know, in this process, is that something that could be possible, like a process by which some of the client, you know, information could be redacted, or would that compromise the ability of staff to be able to do the kind of evaluation that it needs to do, and maybe to set the minds of the peer reviewing entities at ease?
Please, Ms. Center, please respond.
Requiring it to be redacted does cause some issues, and that should be considered. One of them is we would not be able to view these documents in their native format. Taking documents out of their native format, of course we could do that. They are in their native format is within Prima, which is an application, an online application. We can do that. Normally when we would consider doing some type of a review of an entity, we would want to see them in their native format to ensure nothing was modified prior to giving it to us, but we might consider that to be low risk, right? A bigger concern to me is the limitation that it provides on us to pull additional samples. In the one peer review that I went to, there was one area that we were reviewing, and honestly, I can't remember which one it was, where we did not feel we had a sufficient sample to make a determination. And we had asked Cal CPA to pull some additional firms up that we could review. That was done very easily because we were working in the native format, and that allowed us to get the information we needed to make, for the members, the PROC members, to make a determination that they had sufficient evidence to say they met the requirement in that area.
So I do have additional comments. So I appreciate the challenges that would be imposed on that, you know, the additional time that would be imposed. But considering, well, you know, COVID, one thing that COVID did was it made people do things that they were saying for a long time they couldn't do. And it made people, you know, pull out their creative brain, you know, and innovative brain.
I apologize for interrupting. Is this specific to these items?
Yes.
And so I just want to make sure, because we have a lot of topics that we're also moving along and asking them.
Yes, it's about the native. Yes. So my direction is to ask if there is a way to find some creative solution to how to preserve the you know, to balance the confidentiality question that AICPA is addressing, and also to preserve the CBA's ability to see the data in a way that it meets their needs. Yeah, so
before you respond, we've got a great question, but let's pause the response for the next agenda item where it might fit a little bit better under our agenda. So
I'm fine with that.
Hopefully we all have captured that about the native format, because I think that's a great comment. Are there any other questions about the regulatory language or the ASC site checklist for the team, or for our staff member? Okay, and I appreciate the enthusiasm and the robust discussion here. So we are not done, we are just moving along. We can take comments though, absolutely, at each and every step of the way. So I believe we have tabled additional board comments about this, or we've exhausted them. Any additional public comment about this agenda item in the room? Hearing none, WebEx moderator, would you please open it up for public comment? And we are on agenda item 2H.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click that question mark, type comment, send it to all panelists. If you called in, you can press *3 to raise your virtual hand. I see no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
On a related topic, but moving on to a different agenda item. This is the discussion and possible action regarding challenges associated with the peer review program. Ms. Center?
Thank you. The purpose of this agenda item is to provide the board with an opportunity to review and discuss the challenges that we face with the AICPA's peer review program. There's much to cover in this presentation, and with the board president's permission, we may want to entertain questions as we go along if you think it is necessary.
Yes, so committee members, please, we will pause, and if we do not pause, please raise your hand and you will be acknowledged. Thank you.
Challenges have been grouped into 4 areas that are detailed in the written item that you have before you, and I will summarize those in my presentation. But before I start that summary, I think it's important to draw your attention to the background section of the item. As mentioned on the bottom of the first page, the board leadership identified peer review as a priority project in 2022, and as part of that project, the annual site visit checklists were updated, the Peer Review Oversight Committee, or PROC, member orientation materials were enhanced in the areas of member roles and responsibilities, and statutes and regulations were reviewed. Additionally, as part of that priority project, CBA management discussed the concerns outlined on the top of page 2 with CalCPA and AICPA on numerous occasions. Ultimately, the discussion ceased when it became apparent that a mutually agreeable resolution was not forthcoming for the following concerns. 1, ensuring all documents are provided to the board upon request. 2, ensuring all substandard or failed peer review reports are filed with the board. And 3, selection of attendees associated with oversight activities. At its January 2023 meeting, the board received and discussed the PROC's inability to perform their annual administrative site visit to CalCPA in 2022. The administrative site visit was canceled due to AICPA's refusal to allow staff to observe the administrative site visit. The purpose of staff participation is to observe the PROC members and monitor that they are carrying out functions as directed by the board and in accordance with relevant statutes and regulations. Additionally, relying solely on the PROC leads to key person dependence, lack of consistency, and an inability for staff to validate that this critical part of the peer review program is being conducted as directed by the board. Staff role does not involve actively looking for firm violations, and the board has never opened an enforcement action against a licensee based on information obtained through the ASV. Jim Brackens, Vice President of Ethics and Practice Quality at the AICPA, was present at the January board meeting and answered member questions. The board concluded its discussions by directing staff to work with President Salazar to draft a letter to AICPA outlining the board's concerns regarding peer review oversight. On February 17, 2023, the CBA sent the requested letter to AICPA outlining the board's concerns. A copy of the letter is provided as attachment 3 for your review. On March 10, 2023, the board received a response from AICPA, which is included as an attachment in the supplemental materials memo. The background section of the AICPA response may lead to a misunderstanding of how the peer review mandate in California came about. After peer review became mandatory for AICPA membership, the AICPA actively solicited state boards of accountancy to include peer review in their state statutes and regulations. In 2009, the board sponsored an assembly bill that required all California licensed firms providing accounting and auditing services to undergo a peer review once every 3 years as a condition of license renewal. This legislative action transitioned the program from a voluntary firm-to-firm program focused on remediation to a mandated activity for license renewal. This represents an important shift in the manner in which peer review operates. Peer review now operates under a regulatory framework, and the board has a responsibility to oversee the peer review program. The legislature expressly created the Peer Review Oversight Committee to assist the board in this important oversight function. Further, the board implemented regulations to ensure the board and the Peer Review Oversight Committee have access to the necessary information to ensure the program adheres to California requirements. It is the responsibility of each jurisdiction that adopted peer review as a mandate to make its own determination regarding oversight. The board did not surrender its oversight function to the Peer Review Oversight Committee, but instead uses staff and the Peer Review Oversight Committee to complete this critical function. It would be inconsistent with state statute and regulations for the AICPA to make determinations about how it will allow the CBA to conduct its oversight. Let's now move on to a summary of the 4 areas of concern, unless there's questions on the background.
You have a question, Mr. Savoy?
I had asked to put this item on the agenda as stated here in the background, and I'd like to put in plain English what led to my request so that the board members all understand what had transpired and why I got somewhat upset at the last board meeting. Sometime in early 2001, Ms. Bowers, by accident, became aware of a situation and then alerted then President Nancy Kerrigan and myself, and we then took action. What had happened was one of our PROC members failed his peer review. Okay, so somebody on our advisory committee, his firm failed peer review. We were not aware of it. AICPA was aware of it, and for lack of a better word, did not notify us, but did consult with the California CPA Society. That advisory member was called into a meeting with the then head of our PROC committee, and discussions took place that we were not involved in about how they were going to deal with the situation. Obviously, they were told about confidentiality, but from my perspective, the minute our PROC chairperson became aware of something that was going on, should have been brought to the attention of this board. It was not. We became aware of it by accident and proceeded to write the letters as you now see them that were signed by both Ms. Corrigan and myself to Cal CPA and to the AICPA, informing them that this was unacceptable and unprofessional. That has led to most of these discussions that are now taking place, but I thought it was important that you all knew firsthand, reading between the lines of what has been presented, of exactly my understanding of how these events took place and where we're going with them from here.
All right, so I did not hear a question in there, but I did hear additional background. It's correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you, sir. We have another comment, Mr. Rosenbaum.
I'll follow on with the question then, and that is, earlier in your presentation on the previous item, you indicated that should there be a failed peer review, that would be reported to the board. What explains the failure to report this failed peer review?
Mr. Franzel, would you like to comment?
Yes. So the underlying circumstances that led to the chair and a PROC member having discussions, and CalCPA and AICPA's involvement as well was actually due to an enforcement action being brought by the AICPA or being considered by the AICPA against the PROC member, not for his failed peer review, but for failing to perform peer reviews in a timely manner. And so there was a failure of him as a peer reviewer in performing his services, but the underlying issues of confidentiality and some of those other items that Mr. Savoy had highlighted are the underpinnings of the concern, and then the dialogue that occurred between the AICPA, CalCPA, PROC member is the understanding that we have, but it wasn't from a failed peer review, but from a failure to perform peer reviews in a timely manner by that PROC member. Those are a separate kind of function that the AICPA administers through its enforcement division. So those don't get reported to us unless they result in actual action taken by the AICPA.
My question is actually, why was the failed peer review, not the failure to do a peer review, but why was the failed peer review not reported? Was there not a failed peer
correct.
review?
It was a failure to perform the peer review.
Sorry, that was my misunderstanding.
Ms. Center, we have, sorry, one more another comment? Ms. Rosemont?
A question of interest, and that is, given that the legislature established the PROC, and the PROC are appointed, or they are, I guess, technically state employees, what would be the difference from an oversight standpoint between staff and a PROC member? In other words, what is the, this might be a question for the AICPA or CalCPA, so what's the hesitancy in having staff participate in the annual reviews versus a PROC member participating in the annual reviews?
So I think that's a great question, but it seems directed not at our staff. So can we table that and keep that question in mind? Because I think it's a great question.
I agree. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Additional questions? I don't see any green lights. Ms. Center, please continue.
Okay. I'm going to now go through the areas of concern. They begin on page 3 of the materials that you have. The first area of concern that is in the item is access to peer review related confidential information. At its May 2019 meeting, the CBA approved a letter to the AICPA highlighting concerns with Chapter 3 of the AICPA Peer Review Oversight Handbook, which addresses confidentiality of peer review information. AICPA did not make changes to the handbook despite the feedback they received from this board. California firms participating in PREMA increased the board access to peer review information, but just to be clear, it does not provide access to the entire catalog of peer review related documents. Instead, the board must specifically request documentation from AICPA. Presently, the AICPA's policy prevents the release of the requested documentation without specific permission in writing from the firm. The board requests peer review related documents in the course of enforcement investigations. The inability to receive timely documents interferes with the board's ability to conduct timely investigations. Further, the AICPA's policy prohibits staff from observing the PROC annual administrative site visit. AICPA's policy is in direct conflict with California law and the board's consumer protection mandate. The second issue, outlined on page 4, is AICPA's communication with PROC members. In early 2021, the board became aware that the CalCPA engaged in direct communication with members serving on the board's PROC committee without the knowledge of the CBA. As a result of this issue, the board sent letters to AICPA and CalCPA setting expectations for the board and CalCPA communication. This is the issue that Member Savoy brought up. Please note that the agenda item, if you're looking for this, incorrectly states that the letter to CalCPA was dated May 16th. It's actually May 20th, so if you're finding it hard to find that, that's why. Both the AICPA and CalCPA sent letters to the board in response. The AICPA's position is that they were operating under the strict confidentiality rules put in place by the AICPA standards. This statement is concerning, and it suggests that AICPA and CalCPA, working under AICPA's direction, believe that they have authority to determine what is appropriate to share with the board. This is in direct conflict with California law and the board's consumer protection mandate. The letters are attached in attachments 5 through 8 in your materials. And just as a follow-up to Member Savoy, the issue was brought to our attention when we were told that a member of our PROC that we had planned to perform the ASV visit would not be allowed to perform that function. We did not quite understand why, and it took further questioning to find out the underlying concern. The third issue, starting on page 4, is the lack of access to failed or substandard peer reviews for firms operating in California. Pursuant to Business and Professions Code, Section 5076, the AICPA shall file an electronic copy of all substandard peer reviews issued to California licensed firms within 60 days of the report being accepted. The electronic filing is done through PRIMA. The board believed that AICPA had programmed PRIMA to ensure that California had access to all substandard peer reviews for California licensed firms. It has come to the attention of staff that PRIMA does not provide access to substandard peer reviews if the California licensed firm is headquartered in another state and uses an administering entity other than CalCPA. It is staff's understanding that the board would not receive substandard peer reviews from these firms unless the firm specifically gives the AICPA permission to share the information with the board. This creates a gap in ensuring that the board receives the full universe of substandard peer review reports and gives out-of-state firms the authority on deciding whether CBA is provided information on their failed peer review. At this time, staff is unable to determine if this gap has resulted in specific substandard peer reviews not being submitted to the board in violation of Business and Professions Code Section 5076. The last issue I'm going to discuss is the lack of access to peer review related information in PRIMA. The ability for California licensees to opt out of using PRIMA results in a lack of information being provided to the board through PRIMA. If a firm opts out of using PRIMA, staff might only see their acceptance date, period of review, and if they dropped or terminated. Firms that do opt in have the option to provide basic or expanded information to the board. A list of what is provided in the expanded information is on page 5 of the item. At its May 2022 meeting, the board approved an item that recommended seeking a legislative change that could require California firms to opt in to the PRIMA system. Requiring firms to opt in would provide the board with increased, but not complete, access to peer review related documentation for California firms. Additionally, PRIMA does not allow staff to obtain all relevant statistical information on California firms. Currently, the board must request statistical information from CalCPA or AICPA and wait for a response. Relying on CalCPA or AICPA to provide statistical information impedes the board's ability to quickly access data that may be required for peer review oversight and prevents the board from obtaining full transparency of the CBA recognized peer review program provider. Further, the board often does not receive timely and complete answers and must engage in multiple emails and communications before the required information is obtained. In closing, I would like to express my appreciation to the CalCPA, who served as an intermediary between CBA and the AICPA with the goal of reaching mutually agreeable resolutions on various concerns. I would also like to acknowledge that staff have worked diligently with AICPA to find resolutions to the challenges I have outlined. Regrettably, the AICPA believes that they have the authority to determine what is shared with the regulatory agencies, which impedes the board's ability to perform oversight functions of the peer review process and ultimately prevents the board from carrying out the mission of consumer protection. As next steps, staff have identified 2 potential options, but the board should feel free to discuss an option not identified by staff. One option is to consider the removal of its recognition of AICPA as a peer review program provider. Pursuant to the California Code of Regulations, sections 48.5, the board is authorized to remove recognition if the program does not comply with the statutes and regulations that govern the peer review program in California. The second option is to consider addressing this issue as part of the board's sunset review report, which could include proposed legislative language. Regardless of the next steps the board considers, it may want to specifically consider the potential impacts of any various course of action. That concludes my presentation. I'll turn it back over to President Salazar.
Thank you, Ms. Center, for that report. We have a hand up already, Ms. Tu.
Ms. Center, thank you so much for that information you presented. The option of removing AICPA, we still need, it's regulatory that we do a peer review. So if they are removed, does that mean that function will then fall back to CBA?
We had limited conversations with legal counsel on that question, and I believe initial thought, which I don't believe is formed into a legal opinion yet, but initial thought would be that if we took action to remove them as a recognized peer review program provider, we just would not have a recognized peer review program provider at that time. Therefore, individual firms as well as the board could not have that as a requirement at that time until the board took action to recognize someone else.
Let me just ask a follow-up question before calling on Mr. Rosenbaum. So is that equivalent to saying there would effectively be a peer review holiday for licensees during the period in which there was not a recognized provider?
Yes.
Thank you for that clarification. We have a question for Mr. Rosenbaum.
I just had one question. I don't know if it's administrative or legal, but for those firms that are headquartered outside of California that have opted out, is there a way to flag those firms on our website that these would be pending inclusion into Sunset Review, for example? But these are the firms that have, for whatever reason, opted out of sharing information on their peer review?
At this point in time, I'm not sure I could even tell you who those firms are. I would like to acknowledge Rich Simidian, who is working for CalCPA, who has worked diligently to try and investigate what this gap actually is. And so it's only recently that we've been able to determine who these firms, the category of firms who may be falling out of this requirement. If you are asking if we can take the next step, which is to go forth and identify the firms, if you're asking us to do that, I think that is a next step that we can take back.
Well, frankly, it seems like a fairly straightforward request to look at California licensees and compare that against those who have not opted in or have opted out. I honestly think that would be a fairly straightforward question to ask those who have the information. And then the next step would be whether or not is there a way to highlight those on our CBA website.
All right. Well, thank you for those questions. I'd like to ask Mr. Franzella to respond.
A couple of pieces on your remarks, Mr. Rosenbaum, is hopefully those firms are reporting it because that's a requirement that they have to do. This is a backstop kind of idea with the AICPA that they're required to kind of hopefully fill a gap that isn't very large. And we're hoping that firms are following through on their requirements. Secondly, checking them out, I think, has been somewhat of a problem. That I agree with you. It seems like it should be an easy request, but the way that they get put into the AICPA system with their firm name and how they're identified, and they don't use California firm numbers, nor do they have consistency from state to state and where they're headquartered, has actually been the biggest problem. And I think we continue to ask the AICPA about those questions and hope to get a resolution from them. But it has proven difficult to identify that group. Even California's own licensees, when we search them up, is difficult sometimes because they're not identified in the same way as they are licensed here. So it's kind of maybe a deficiency within the PRIMA system because it's not collecting every piece of information it probably otherwise should in terms of maybe where you're licensed, where you're authorized to practice, firm, your numbers in those states. So there'd be a way like CPA Verify does where you're able to identify people pretty effectively.
Follow-up question. Have we asked the AICPA to consider expanding that criteria so that at some point in the future it could be available? I would imagine it's not just our board, but maybe other boards that would benefit from that.
To the best of my knowledge, I think the topic has come up. I don't know if there's been a specific request to say we would like to see the following captured as part of your enrollment or information. I do understand there's some limitations with PRIMA, the way it has been developed. However, that is, at least in terms of, they don't even have a place right now to capture some of this information. Like I'm headquartered in New Jersey, but I have a license in 4 other states. So the only place that's getting reporting is New Jersey for that particular firm, unless you know to go look for them.
Thank you for that. And then we had a comment from Board Member Ward.
My question is, and I might not understand, but I want to make sure. So if we only have the one place, AICPA, and if we withdraw, then the companies who are looking for peer review, does that not affect them greatly or more because they're the ones out of compliance at this point because they have no one to recognize their peer review?
I'd like to ask Mr. Franzella to comment.
So maybe taking a step back, staff aren't actually recommending we do a withdrawal at this point. We're talking about potentially, staff didn't come prepared to talk about a withdrawal and what that would necessarily mean. We wanted to wait to hear from the board as to whether or not they want to begin discussing some of that. But as it relates to, I think, the question, your specific question, if peer review if the board were ultimately kind of go the farthest route and withdraw the recognition, firms would still be going through peer review as part of their AICPA membership. So there would still be some firms who are doing that, and firms who aren't obligated to do that we'd basically have a moratorium or suspension of that requirement, is my understanding, for renewals. So people wouldn't be adversely affected in terms of being able to be renewed. The board would be weighing that against potential consumer protection impacts, whether or not firms are performing work in accordance with ANA standards. And so there's a lot to weigh. But again, staff didn't come prepared to talk about that particular element. We wanted to maybe hear from the board before we kind of start exploring some of those ramifications. But it wouldn't have a direct impact to their ability to get renewed. We would renew them without that requirement.
And then we had a hand up for Ms. Hines. I'm going to then exercise my own chair comment, and then we will move along to Ms. Lotta.
Thank you, President Salazar. So again, public member, this is really complicated. There are a lot of complicated issues here. And one of the things that kind of stood out to me is that it seems like there's been a change in the relationship between the AICPA and their role as in the peer review process, and the recognition that the CBA has now become the regulatory body over the peer review process. There are a number of issues here that, I think it's difficult for us to ask and answer adequately in one meeting. and, you know, to wait 2 months to get a response and then to come to a solution. This has been going on since 2019, at least. So I'm wondering if President Salazar, it might be appropriate to, you know, delegate a group to, you know, evaluate this, and then come back to the board with broader recommendations about how to do this, and then to also investigate some of these outstanding questions that exist.
So I appreciate that suggestion, Board Member Hines. What I would say is that is a great suggestion. Let's keep it in our pocket and continue the conversation and see if that makes sense when we're done. I will at this point sort of exercise my opinion. I would like to make a comment as well. There is a lot in here, and I do want to acknowledge for our public members, this is complicated. Even if you are a CPA, it's okay. There's a lot here. There's a lot of history, and I do think the context is really important. And I want to acknowledge that there are frustrations. It has been imperfect, but I will say that there is a history. It started. And I want to keep us focused on today. We've got 4 items, we've got responses, and I do just want to point out that we have a program that is AI CPAs. We have our administering entity for California that our board has selected, which is Cal CPA, and they have provided responses. I know they're here in the room and at some point will make comments. And they have offered to work with our staff and continue. So I do want to make sure that we are not ignoring forward momentum that we are making and can make. There are some ideas in here where we can break down these 4 points and continue conversation. So that is my hope, and I appreciate pointing out that the goal of this is not to ask for a motion 1 or 2 and make a decision. This is really to continue to have our public conversation about the needs of this board and what our board needs and how we move forward with protecting our consumers. So that's just kind of a spiel, but I think we've got questions. We've got a great suggestion, which is an option for a task force, but I believe we had one more question, which was Ms. Lotta. So please.
Thank you, President Salazar. I believe my question is not appropriate for this discussion based on Mr. Franzella's previous comment, but I just want to confirm. So my question was, do we have peer review program providers in mind? And I think that does tie into the impact of that first consideration, but please confirm if that's beyond the scope of this conversation.
There are no other peer review program providers.
Okay.
So
there's
it's the only game in town.
Okay.
Which is, I think, part of the reason why there's this, why there's a conflict and it's being resolved in this particular way, because there's not other options to kind of go and look at.
Mr. Savoy?
So outside of removing AICPA, as I don't see that a particular option at this moment, where do we go from here? And I believe compromise is an important word. California Board of Accountancy, albeit under strict regulations to what we have to do and required to do, I believe we've always been willing as a board to make compromises to achieve maybe not 100% of what we need, 75, 80% of what we need, and be satisfied. I guess my question is, and I'll pose it to whomever, how far is the AICPA willing to compromise rather than their hardcore stance, it's their way or the highway? Because then it backs us into a corner where we'll have no choice. So I do believe there's ongoing discussions about compromise. I'd like to see them move the needle a little bit and not us moving the needle all the time. I do believe there's conversations going on, and it's which course of action we need to take as a board under legislative guidance to at least get to a place that we're comfortable. maybe not 100%, but I guess my comment and question is, are they willing to compromise, and about what points, so that we can get satisfied with what we need?
Yeah, I was going to say that we have, and that does sound like an ask for commentary from our partners, but it appears we have one more board comment.
I would just say that the corollary to that question is, what is the limit to our, as a board, compliance with existing regulation? In other words, we can only bend so far before we are now not performing our duty or in trouble with regulatory framework. And so I don't know where that line is drawn, but it appears that maybe we're close to it already.
And that is a well-stated concern as board members that I think we all have. We have had a lot of conversation at the risk of putting our administrative entity on the spot, or do we have any public comment for those participating in person here in Sacramento? Some of these questions might be best addressed from your perspective, or through, please, Mr. Fox, I would like to invite your response.
Jason Fox of the California Society of CPAs. And so a couple comments, and let me start with maybe introducing the gentleman to my left here, and then maybe ask through the president to take, I know Mr. Brackens is online, and he had some brief comments he wanted to make, and then we have some additional comments related to the substance of this, but so if that's okay with you from an order of operation. Rich Sabidian served, he's an audit partner for many years, and then a chair of Cal CPA from a voluntary standpoint, but also served as interim CEO when a lot of these peer review issues started to bubble up, and has been consulting with our peer review program, and as of January is actually the interim director of our peer review program to kind of fill some staffing needs. And so the reason why Rich has been here is wears a lot of hats for Cal CPA. So I know he has a couple comments he wanted to make, maybe clarify, and might be helpful to relate to Mr. Savoy's comments, and then I know Mr. Brackens wants to address a little color related to their letter.
Thank you, Jason. And I don't know where to begin. There's a lot there to absorb. Yes, my current role, I am in an interim role as for Cal CPA as peer review director, which I've had for about 60 days. And before that, I didn't spend a lot of time at all in peer review. I spent 32 years in public practice, and after doing that, went on to teaching, which is what I do most of the time. So right now, there's probably 60 very rejoicing students, because today was class day, but it coincided with the meeting. But I did want to address, and I know Jim Brackens from the ACPA is on, we'll give him an opportunity to talk, but I want to speak specifically on the PROC member issue, because I think that's sort of an underlying issue, and I was very close to it because I'm the one who made the communications. I was serving as the interim, at that time, a different interim role, but interim director of Cal CPA at that point in time. And on that matter is, as Mr. Frenzella pointed out correctly, the issue that was at hand was a performance issue of an individual as a peer reviewer, not the firm getting a substandard report. So somebody is a peer reviewer. And at that point, we concluded it was important to communicate that there were performance-related issues on a committee member, a member that was serving in the peer review oversight committee. What we determined after internal discussions with the AICPA, the appropriate way to do that was to contact the chair of the primary committee that we communicate with in the peer review, from the peer review perspective, which was the chair of the peer review oversight committee. With the authorization of the individual, and this was an ongoing performance issue, ongoing matter at that point in time, but the determination was made that we would communicate that item to the chair of of that committee. With the view, it was important to share that information as timely as possible, and that is what we did. Now, in hindsight, and after discussions with the staff, it was being very clear there are other ways that we could have approached that, and I think we have addressed that going forward. If there are any other performance-related issues of peer reviewers who also serve on one of your committees, that we would communicate those matters without in a different manner, but we would communicate those matters appropriately. So we think we've addressed that, but by no means was there any intention to circumvent the process or to determine what needed to be done. I know there was an extensive review after that process, but just I wanted to put that out there because I was personally involved in that communication to, at that point, the PROC chair as to why and the reasons why we went ahead and approached that. But at its core was to make sure that we communicated that specific matter as quickly as possible as we were going through that. So I wanted to address that. I know there are other points, 3 points that are very important, most important, I think, somewhat important, and we've had a lot of discussion, or heard a lot of discussion on the site visit. So I'll come back and talk about those items, but maybe we can have Jim Brackens from the AICPA, who responded to the board's request, maybe comment first, if I may, and then I can come back and address.
Right. Well, thank you, Mr. Fox and Mr. Simidian, for your commentary. At this point, we do have a request, and I would like to honor it to invite Mr. Jim Brackens from the AICPA to be elevated to comment. So I'd like to ask our web moderator to make that happen for us. We are looking for Mr. Jim Brackens. Thank you.
President Salazar,
Mr. Brackens?
I think Sherry has already done that. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I believe we have one new member who hasn't met me. I had the pleasure of seeing you all last month, and or 2 months ago at this point maybe, and regret that I'm not there with you today. I always enjoy the face-to-face interaction, but I think I was recognized. I am the Vice President of Ethics and Practice Quality at the peer review, at the AICPA, and peer review is one of the functions that follows under me. I'm going to not address this the way I started to, because I think this could go on for probably longer than you all want to discuss. I'm going to just start at a high level. I mean, first, I believe that what the goal for the board and the AICPA is both the same. I mean, we have consumer interest in mind, and the way that we are aiding in that area is making sure that firms are performing their primarily audit, but accounting and auditing engagements in accordance with standards. And if they're not, we're making sure they get remediation. That is how the public is served. I mean, that has always been our interest, continues to be our interest. Mr. Savoy, you made the comment about whether we would compromise. I'd like to say, and I think some of the things are in the letter, hopefully say I don't know that compromise is the word so much as we have a long history of doing everything we possibly can within that constraint, that final line in terms of breaching firm confidentiality, that we're always trying to find ways to provide the information. And I'm just going to take one of the examples that we responded to in the letter, and that was about the out-of-state California firms. First off, I want to be clear. Any firm that had its peer review headquarters in California, regardless of who administers that peer review, their field reports are available in FSBA, Facilitated State Board Access. They have been and will be. The issue is those that are not headquartered, do not have their peer review office in California, and in essence, they were domiciled in another state. In our letter, it points out a lot of states prohibit that information from being made public without firm permission. And your statute even says we can't be made to violate another state's law. So it puts us in kind of a tough position. So, what we do have in facilitated state board access is the ability for firms to what we call expand access, that they can either say California has the right to see their peer review documents or reports, or all states. They can do it all at one time. And that allows them to meet the obligation. Now, yes, we don't know if they're in California or not. We have no idea. We do not track, and there's a lot of logistical problems why we don't track firm licensure. We have looked into that. But one of the things we've suggested in the letter is if the staff can provide us with firms that are licensed in California but not in California, do not have their primary office in California, we'd be glad to look to see whether or not they have provided their failed peer review report and take steps to make sure you get it. I will point out, one of the things we did a long time ago because of this capturing of information is all firms are required to put into PRIMA, and I'm going to make a distinction between PRIMA and FSBA in a minute because there's confusion there, but they are required to put in there their federal identification number. We made sure that is something that could be done. It's not like a social security number. It's allowed to be done. And one of the things we suggested, and I think only one board has looked into it, is capturing federal identification numbers as part of your registration process for firm licensure. Then we can easily run a report. We can tell in a minute then who's missing. These are things we've done to try to find ways to accommodate the needs of state boards. And like I said, that's just one example. That's the only one I really wanted to address that's in our letter. Other than, although I think Rich might want to speak to this as well, one of the comments is talking about, the administrative site visit. Rich has taken a look, and my staff took a quick glance, so did I, at the checklist you all have. And the vast majority of the items that are in that checklist do not involve confidential information. And so one of the things we've suggested is, could we explore a means of bifurcating the site visit so that staff have full access to the discussion and the items that are in the areas that do not expose firm level information, and either have a separate meeting or have the staff recuse themselves, or if it's on Zoom, depart the meeting, where the PROC members look at the firm specific, and organize the visit that way. That's a suggestion. And I guess my point here is we are open to looking at ways that with as long as we don't go beyond that one area that we just are not able to go beyond, we absolutely want to find a ways to collaborate and meet our common objective. And in fact, I like the suggestion of having a task force. I would welcome that, with staff, board members, Cal Society, and myself or some of my staff being involved. I think it'd be a great way to kind of hash out a lot of these things and see what we could do. Now, I'm willing to address specifics in my letter, but I'm going to stop at this point in case there's questions or comments.
All right. Thank you very much. Are there questions from our board members? We do have one from board member Hines.
So again, I go back, he mentioned the task force. I go back to asking President Salazar to consider that as a possibility, because this has been very uncomfortable. The discussion and the dialogue has been very uncomfortable. It feels like there is a misunderstanding about the balance of authority in the relationship here is. Hearing words like accommodate, our concerns. The CBA is the regulatory body that oversees the peer review process, and it did that with the support. It took up that charge with the support of AICPA, having us pursue legislating and requiring this peer review process. It almost created like a monopoly, of sorts, in terms of, how the peer review process is operated. And over time, it seems as though the parties have grown a little too comfortable with what historically has been the relationship, and it hasn't been reflected that the balance of the relationship has changed. And I think that it's the CBA that has been really accommodating of the word intransigence comes to mind. And I don't want to be disrespectful of the respect that I think AICPA and Cal CPA has shown to the CBA, but the continued explanations about why something has happened as opposed to there really being some addressing of the problem, is problematic. The tone has all been very respectful, but it almost is like I'm sorry that your feelings are hurt, but not really trying to figure out, a solution. So, we can keep going back and forth about we could fix this one thing and fix that one thing, but ultimately the confidence and the trust between these bodies is broken down. And, I think a body that can really just dig into all of this and then come back to the board with some real concrete solutions, or come back to the board and say like, hey, there's not a solution here. Parties are not moving. There's no compromise available. And so, board, now take your next step. It just feels like that's the direction that it's more constructive for us to move in.
And that has prompted several hands. So we are going to start with Board Member Ward.
I wanted to say thank you, Ms. Hines. She says everything that I cannot say. I understand exactly, in my words to be short, being a public member, if CBA has authority, and to me, being a public member, we need this, you can't do it, goodbye. Just that simple. But it's not that simple, right? I see that part. So I do agree, more information come back, get a better understanding. Hopefully they can talk it out kind of thing. But if not, to me, it's very clear. We need something. If we don't have it, then that's what it is.
All right, Ms. Lata.
Thank you, President Salazar. Yes, Ms. Hines, thank you for identifying that fundamental base level issue that we're kind of talking around. I appreciate that. I just kind of want to circle back to what the objective here is today in terms of making progress with this issue. I know that staff, one of the things they asked us to consider is addressing this as part of the CBA Sunset Review Report, which I believe is a couple years in the future.
Is January 2024, and our report is portions of it are probably in process.
When we say make it or address it in the Sunset Review Report, it would be the report is being drafted presently and would be submitted on or before the end of the year.
Okay. Is that sufficient time for us? It seems like a more pressing issue. So is there like an earlier time we can discuss that, or would that be a sufficient length of time?
It's really up to the board to make that decision in terms of how it wants to prioritize that. This could continue to be a constant discussion at the board as a piecemeal approach. It could be done at the CPC as another alternative to break it down if that's how the board wants to address it. There's any alternative the board would like to proceed with, but encapsulating in the Sunset Review Report seems like the appropriate vehicle, because if there's eventually legislation that needs to be enacted to address some of these issues, then that's the vehicle we want to do it in, and not try to send it out another year when we're in sunset and trying to add it into it at that point.
Okay, I defer to President Salazar to make a recommendation.
Okay, did we have other comments? I thought I saw one more hand here before. I thank you for that. I'm going to table that, if you don't mind, and come back to it.
So I've got just a couple of things, but they are ones I brought up earlier, but now that we've got Mr. Fox, Mr. Smitty, and Mr. Brackens, that maybe we can address it here. And one of the issues was trying to identify those out-of-state firms that have opted out of PREMA, so that we have a lack of insight into some of the operations there. Mr. Bracken, you indicated that should we provide a list of California licensees not headquartered in California, that you would be able to provide any sort of failed peer reviews. But I assume that that's something that can be done, relatively quickly. But I'm also concerned then that really sort of does indicate that the regulatory process is taking really second fiddle to the AICPA, and so that I think was a little bit of concern to me. But I would think that one thing that staff here could probably do fairly quickly would be to provide a list of California licensees not headquartered in California, to allow the AICPA to both, one, provide any information on failed peer reviews, but also, number two, to identify those firms, irrespective of where they're headquartered, as to whether they are opting in or opting out. And I don't know that that would require the firms to affirmatively say that you're allowed to share that information. That seems to be an administrative, they are or they are not. Related to that, not something that I brought up earlier, would be that why wouldn't then the AICPA require firms to provide this information if they want to do business in California? But that's maybe something separate. And I'm going to put these both out there first. That's the first one, and at least that would provide some data to the extent that we do form a task force, or that would certainly inform some of the ongoing dialogue irrespective. The second thing is, I guess the question is, what is the real perceived difference between a PROC member here in California versus a staff member here in California? And this goes back to, the communication, and maybe we can get that one off the list, that we had a failure of communication, but Cal CPA seemed to believe that the reporting and communication with the PROC member was the appropriate avenue, given that they're the ones they deal with. And I'm assuming that when you're thinking that's the appropriate avenue, you were thinking you are reporting it to the board. It is being reported to a regulatory agency. And so question is, what difference does it make whether someone's on the PROC or someone's on the staff as to whether they attend these annual site visits?
So yeah, let me, I'll Rich maybe address those comments, but let me take a step back and just kind of address our broader peer review. So when peer review was a voluntary, remedial program, that certainly helped quality. I think it got elevated in a positive way from our perspective by looping into the regulatory framework as a mandatory condition of licensure. We think that's a good thing. It helps people proactively improve quality and also as a key consumer protection component. I think, from Cal CPA's standpoint as the AE administering entity for the ASPA program in California and the primary interfacing with the Board of Accountancy, we're kind of in a unique perspective on all of these issues. This is where we're trying to figure out how do we land this plane in a positive way here. And I think we're trying to say, the confidentiality piece and the regulatory requirements may not, there's got to be some kind of middle ground of how we try to get to compromise, because the program is critical and important from our perspective and for consumers in California. We don't want to see that go. And so I think that's the spirit of our offering, try to, creative solutions comes from how do we make it work. And so I'll let Rich kind of touch on some of the more technical questions that were raised.
Yeah, well, let me first address, Mr. Rosenbaum, your two questions, maybe in reverse order, in terms of our role. And I may need some air support from Mr. Brackens on this, but it's my understanding that the PROC structure, the PROC members, in addition to the matter that I communicated, the PROC members are involved in ongoing review of matters with regard to peer review. They participate almost monthly in meetings where the discussions around different peer reviews are taking place. They're on our invite list almost every month as we have different acceptance body meetings. And those members have different responsibilities than staff. And the objective there, the part of that structure is that the PROC members, separate and apart from members of staff, do not have enforcement and other type of responsibilities. So they were put in place because they're reviewing matters that are ongoing matters where there may be ongoing discussions with regard to what I'll call live information. So part of the structure, as I understand it, was that PROC members would have oversight and the ability to see this information before there's a substandard report, for example. So that's the distinction between, perhaps from our perspective, communicating matters to a PROC member with regard to versus items that might be directed to this board or to the staff. So I don't know if that addresses your second question or not. Jim, do you want to?
Yeah, may I?
Mr. Brackens, we're going to take comments from our board members here, and then I will call on you.
Okay, I was just going to finish answering the question. That's all.
Mr. Simeon, I'm confused. So are you? PROC members are our committee. Okay, yes. We appoint them.
Yes.
So I'm not sure I understand, and I would imagine they would be a public member if they see something or they hear something that is reportable. They are required to do so, especially the CPA members. So I'm confused about how you put the PROC member as separate from our staff member. Can you clarify that, or do you want to clarify that?
If I may, maybe I could just ask Jim to comment on that, and I'll come back and provide some further commentary there.
Yeah. Thank you, Rich. I will answer that question directly. I'd like to step back. The PROCs were formed back when state boards began several years ago, before my time. I'm sorry, I'm getting a feedback loop here, so that's why I'm hesitating on speaking. Where the PROCs were formed to be able to bridge that gap.
I apologize to interrupt. I apologize. This is the moderator. If we can please have all the microphones muted in the conference room so we don't hear the echoing in the WebEx. I apologize, Mr. Brackens. Please continue.
Thank you. That helps. I appreciate it. What I was saying is the reason for a PROC, why it was formed, and why when California was starting its law, why we made sure there was that you all put a PROC in there, is that it's meant to be a body that, in essence, agrees to the confidentiality of the process, that they report about the integrity of the process, the effectiveness of the process, without speaking to firm specific information, and that they're free to do that. We have long, and I should say that we have always had as a part of the program where we've had this requirement, not just of state boards in terms of what we release, but just anyone. For example, if we consider, let me back up. We never say who can be on a PROC, for example. That's the state board's decision. But what we're prohibited from doing is providing this confidential information to anyone we perceive as having a conflict of interest. And an example of that is if someone is on a state society's ethics committee, they would not have access to it. That would be a conflict of interest even within our organizations, and we do not provide that information. So this is just carrying it through to what we're doing. And so I don't know if that answers a question, but that's why we don't consider them staff or different, why they are different from staff, because as was made clear very early on, I mean, the staff of the board would be expected, if they saw an action such as that to report it to the enforcement division. And that is counter to the effectiveness of having confidentiality within the process.
Thank you, Mr. Brackens, for sharing the AICPA perspective. We do have an additional question here, so I'd like to call on Ms. Chu and then give some commentary of my own.
Thank you. Mr. Bracken, I appreciate your explanation. I'm still puzzled by the fact that you do not see PROC member as a part of the regulatory process. I'm thinking back into accreditation for university. That's kind of, in my mind, maybe similar, or I could be totally wrong because I'm not in the industry of accounting. So that happens, and confidentiality can happen within the process, and then afterward they can still report if there is any irregularities. I don't know if there's a possible compromise there, but I need to formulate that in my own mind as well, but I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, thank you, Board Member Chu, for adding the commentary in there. We've had a lot of discussion here. I'm going to make an attempt here to sort of synthesize. We have a sweater, we've pulled a lot of strings. What I'm taking away from this group is there continues to be concern. We have read and evaluated the responses, the string of communications. I appreciate the responses. We did get quick responses from AICPA recently, as a week or so ago, to our questions. There clearly is work to be done. The issue is, as I see it, we have commitments to work with Cal CPA to improve some of the issues, ensure that poor communication issues that happened in the past don't happen further. I think that commitment to a partnership is still there. I think the issue that remains has to do with the concern about the regulatory responsibility this board has, and we do have a request that this be delegated to a different group, a subgroup within our organization, and I think that was a very valuable suggestion. I'm going to make a little bit of commentary here and say what I'm hearing is I do hear the AICPA suggestion about bifurcating that ASB list. However, I would like this group or committee to explore a little bit. This is not fully formed, but our administrative entity provides services for other jurisdictions. So I would like to explore some opportunities maybe for staff to potentially look at processes outside of our jurisdictions, which are addressing the processes of our AE, whether or not that could give us some, could inform our board about the processes in place. Because really this is about understanding the processes and oversighting and making sure that there is a confidence that our board is meeting their legislative responsibilities to the consumers. So at this point, I'm going to suggest that this issue be delegated to a CBA, a Board of Accountancy committee, because this really seems to be a regulatory discussion, and I don't believe it's yet ready to go out to a full stakeholder group. And so I would suggest that we put this on the agenda for one of our committees to be determined based upon the one that makes the most sense and has a meeting schedule that would accommodate sort of elevating this. And then the other suggestion would be, I'm also hearing our board, or I'm hoping our board would be amenable to this, potentially also working on the sunset discussion for these issues as they evolve. So that was a lot of stuff. I gave you some opinions. I gave you a recommendation that we move this to a committee, and then we also approve this for, out of these two options, that the board is supportive of, let me see, considering addressing these issues as part of our sunset review report. So that is not a motion. That is more just for discussion to get responses from this committee. Ms. Hines.
You looking for a motion?
This is legal. I have a request.
Yeah, I don't think that we need a motion to put it on a committee agenda for our board to ask a committee that already exists to look at something. I'm not proposing creating anything new.
I'm not sure to whom this would be best approached, but in order to aid the board and perhaps this committee, Mr. Brackens mentioned that some states do have a prohibition against sharing information, which may be the basis of some of the issues. As discussed at the January meeting, we have states that also share our concerns and our issues. And so if legal could request either from board staff or AICPA or whoever can provide this, the references to at least a sample of some of these other states so that legal can explore if the law indeed prohibits us. Typically there's an exemption for regulatory entities and law enforcement entities, et cetera. Also, to explore any possibilities of entering into an MOU with those states in order to share the information as a potential option for this board to relieve that burden.
So I think those suggestions are things that we can work with our staff on. Mr. Franzella, does that seem like an appropriate response? Thank you. And we have a comment from Ms. Hines.
I appreciate that the authority of the president, President Salazar, having the authority to decide where this goes. For my own information, I'd like to just list out some of the things that I, have captured that we've discussed that I would like to make sure that we address. So there's the PRIMA issues and whether the platforms can be modified to generate the information that is needed by the CBA staff of the type that Ms. Center talked about. It seems like there needs to be some evaluation as to whether or not the platforms can be modified to try to get that information or whether something can be developed to get that information. There needs to be some oversight of out of California, out of state headquartered licensees and the issues that Mr. Rosenbaum raised. There needs to be a discussion about what states prohibit the sharing of data and whether or not we could arrive at some kind of solution by looking at whether the FSBA can include an approval where licensees would opt into sharing that information through this FSBA platform so that we could address, the challenges that we're facing. There's the confidentiality issue that the AICPA keeps raising about the access to data. There's a lack of timely response and communication. There's a relationship issue that needs to be addressed between both CBA and AICPA and also Cal CPA. And then it seems like there needs to be some defining of roles and responsibilities. The administrative entity, the PROC members, the CPA staff, to talk about who has what responsibilities and roles, and to really define it clearly so that we don't, so we're all coming on the same page. Because I share Vice President Chu's concerns about the lack of understanding about the CPA's definition of what PROC members are and the AICPA seeing that in a different way and it being incongruent. And then I think that we should also talk about the impact of revoking the AICPA as the reviewing entity and then as the authorized entity, and then what ramifications would come out of that. There was this issue about bifurcating the ASV list. I don't know what that is, but I wrote it down. And then as something to address, and then also asking the staff to look at processes regarding this issue outside of the California jurisdiction.
I thank you for that list. That was helpful.
Can I add one more? Also, our staff need direction, or at least I don't know if it needs to be a motion to put this in parallel for sunset as well. Do you need that from us?
Honestly, at this point, it seems like it's very clear this is going to become a sunset issue. So the dialogue is going to manifest itself that way. So.
Mr. Franzella, would you like to comment on the board member question about, is there a staff recommendation to the committee that would be appropriate?
Honestly, given the sensitivity of this topic, I think it's just best to continue to bring it back to the board through the CPC and allow the CPC, who kind of developed peer review to begin with. I think staff can work independently with members of the PROC at our discretion to engage them and ask questions, get information, use them as subject matter experts. But this is of such importance to this board that it's best just to continue to come from staff's perspective as a CPC item.
My only sort of comment to this as we sort of move towards wrapping this up is we do have some outstanding questions out of this, which have been asked at various places and delineated. I think I would like to maybe ask for authority to draft a response to try to gather some more input so that there might be some answers from our partners to assist that committee in possibly moving forward. Mr. Franzella, I just came up with this. Does that seem like that's an awful big ask? I mean, would that seem appropriate?
I believe the board can provide direction on letters without taking motions. It generally has. And so whether or not they're signed, and in many cases they've been signed by this position when we're communicating back out. So I think we've already set the standard that this board is interested. Prior President Corrigan and Mr. Savoy have both communicated. You have sent a letter. I think any future letters can come directly from the executive officer based on direction from the board without needing a specific motion.
Well, then we will be continuing to work through some of these excellent questions, and I look forward to working with you on the next round of correspondence with the goal of hopefully keeping our conversation moving forward so that we are able to work with this and try to find some solutions. So we do have some folks at the table still. Do we have any final board comments before I invite public comment? I would also like to say thank you to our board members for all your input and ask if there's public comment at the table.
Jason Fox and Rich may have some additional comments. I would just a recommendation. I understand the concurrent processes of what needs to be communicated to the legislature, but I would say I recommend the board allow the CPC and that process to help inform what goes into how that is characterized. Because, candidly, I think once it moves to that level, there's additional complexities that make these nuanced conversations a little bit more challenging. And to the degree Cal CPA and ASB and the stakeholders could be, more engaged in that process, we're happy to help with that. I know there's limitations of providing public comment in this kind of forum, but we're committed to kind of working through those issues.
Yeah, I would just add that the opportunity to continue to work with staff on some of these issues. I think we've made some progress over the last few months on, for example, providing statistical information more timely, providing that type of information we can do it. I think on some of the other topics, I didn't have time to go through all of the comments, but on some of the other areas, such as exploring a bifurcated ASB visit, going through, I think there are some steps that can be taken with regard to ensuring that the firms are going through that process that Mr. Rosenbaum talked about, I'll call the out-of-state issue. I think there are some steps that we can continue to move the ball forward. So we will continue to do that, recognizing we'll have perhaps further discussion with the committee as we go forward, but I think there's an opportunity to do that.
And before we go to web comment, I do want to acknowledge Board Member Savoy.
Yeah, the only comment I'd like to make is that looking at the composition of CPC right now, 2 of the members on that committee are not present today and therefore have missed a tremendous opportunity to get a head start in the process. So my recommendation might be appointing more members, or I just want people to benefit from today, and 2 members are not here. So you may want to look at the composition of that committee in moving forward.
Thank you for that commentary. We also have additional public comment here in the room.
I'll make this brief. Just having the experience of doing probably more of these administrative site visits than others in the room, it would probably be well informed for the CPC to reach out. I'm happy to consult with them, and we don't need to go through it here. The nature of this confidential, so-called confidential information that's being looked at, also the differentiation between staff and the PROC, and how blended that view has been over the years, where you have EAC committee members, also PROC members. You have the PROC under the enforcement chief during part of this time. And so there's been a lot of blending of that. I don't know that, I think Ms. Tu's comment about that being a blurred line, not a bright line, is probably important to note. And so I think the CPC could really benefit from a lot of background information, and I'd be happy to help out in that once it goes to that point.
And thank you, Mr. Gleiser, for that comment as well as that offer of support for our endeavor. Seeing we have additional comments now. Board Member Lotta.
Thank you, President Salazar. I just wanted to concur with the support of the PROC chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So seeing no more public, we have additional public comments in the room. Please introduce yourself so we can recognize you.
Okay, I think that this is on, I think. So thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you a little bit this morning. My name is Dawn Brenner, and I'm here today actually wearing a couple of different hats. I'm the managing partner of a local CPA firm, Grant Bennett Associates, here in Sacramento. So our firm has been through the peer review process quite a few times. I'm also a peer reviewer myself, and I've been doing that for about 15 years. I'm a member of the California Peer Review Committee and also the AICPA Peer Review Board. And I don't know if there's any of you that have been around here long enough to remember the administrative committee of the California Board of Accountancy, but I was actually on that, which I know doesn't even exist anymore under that name. But I was on that actually before becoming a peer reviewer many, many years ago. So I'm giving my age away, I'm sure. But anyway, I just wanted to talk, very briefly about kind of the value of the program and some of the things that we go through. First of all, when we are engaged to do a peer review, there's a matching process in PRIMA. So, for example, I have to have a resume that lists all of my experience. So that is matched up to another firm. So I have to be a peer to review another firm. So, for example, I don't do bank audits, so I would not be allowed to perform an audit of a firm that does a lot of bank audits. Also, as far as the peer review process from a very high level, we look at not only just actual engagements, but we also look at the entire quality control system of the firm, meaning that we review continuing education, we look at independence, compliance, we look actually to make sure that the firm and the various partners have the required licenses with the Board of Accountancy, and then we make our selection of engagements and then recommendation of our report. After that, the peer review acceptance process is extremely rigorous, and there's several levels of review that we go through, from technical reviews to the peer review committee, and that really is where I think the protection to the consumer is provided, in that the peer review committee, in making an evaluation of the peer review itself, will assign remedial action, and then there's a follow-up process whereby the committee makes sure that the remedial action is performed. Meaning that we follow up, making sure it's done, and making sure that the firm is making progress toward improving. And this step, again, is, I feel like, very critical in protecting the consumers. It's already been mentioned, I think, that we have specific procedures in place to terminate a firm, and if they have not shown improvement, and then also that if they have consecutive non-pass reports or fail reports, they are reported to the Board of Accountancy. Very briefly, another point I wanted to make is just that the peer review program is, I think, extremely valuable. Also, not only in the sense of the actual peer review process, but in working with our firms, we share a lot of information with them. We talk about upcoming changes in professional standards. We talk about best practices, and our firms, I think, find a lot of benefit from that. And I really feel like it helps enhance their education, which is another, to me, very important side benefit of the peer review program. So thank you. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those as well.
Do you have any questions for Ms. Bremer? All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that commentary. Oh, and we have additional comments. Welcome to the table, and if you could please state your name so we can recognize you.
My name is Diana Sosa. I'm a partner with Briganti & Company, a CPA firm with 3 offices in the Bay Area. We're over 50 people. I've been through the peer review process. I first was licensed in Washington State, where it was it wasn't as beneficial there. But we have been through peer review I've been on the peer review kind of group committee with the firm that I'm with now. I've been with the firm since 2001. So I've been part of the peer review process every year. One of the things about the peer review, it is such an important process. When I was in Washington State, we had with the Washington Board of Accountancy, we had a little committee that did independent reviews there was a small group of us where practitioners could submit financial statements, and we kind of look at the technical review and give them back. That was kind of the extent of what happened. With the California rule of mandatory peer review, I think it is so important for firms because it makes us a better firm. Our peer review, we learn so much in our peer review. We've learned about tracking for CPE, the ways to make things more like efficient and consistent. We learn new pronouncements that are coming up. There's so much more we learn. We also have staff that are terrified because the peer reviewers are coming. So we have to talk to them. It's like, this is a learning process, and that's the way we address it. Not like somebody's coming in to beat us up, but to make us better. And I talked to one of my partners and told her I was coming today, and she said, one of the things about the peer review process is it's made her such a better auditor because we learn so much and we get so much value out of the program. So I just hope the goal here is the protection of the public. And I mean, everyone's touched on that today, but the other thing is the education of the firms and to try to prevent from a Wild West out there. Someone mentioned that one of the options would be to take the AICPA program away and then mentioned, and someone said, then people who are members of the AICPA would still have to have peer reviews because it's required. I don't have to be a member of the AICPA. I am because my firm requires that. So if my firm decides not to be AICPA, so we get this peer review holiday, that's terrifying to me. I don't think we want to do that. So I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate that we have a good, solid peer review program in California. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sosa, for that comment. It was good to hear from the perspective of someone from the firm perspective who has been through it. So thank you very much. Other questions for Ms. Sosa? Ms. Hines?
Not so much a question. I want to thank you, Ms. Sosa, for coming to provide us with the commentary because it is really helpful for us to hear from you as a licensee about the process, because one of the concerns that has been expressed is that if CBA staff were involved in the process, that somehow licensees would be reticent to be more forthcoming about how they engage in the process because of concern about, enforcement actions or things like that. But to hear you articulate that you actually approach the process much more as a learning process and as a supportive mechanism as opposed to a potential trap, for you, I think that's important for the CPC to note, and then to keep that in mind when we're talking about this confidentiality concern and the impact that it could have on how we evolve this relationship and we resolve some of these concerns and challenges.
Well, thank you. And that concludes our public comments in person. And I would like to ask our WebEx moderator to please open up for online comment. We are running close to lunch, so if there are any public comments, please keep the time frame in mind and open up. Thank you very much.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate and you're logged in, just click on the question mark inside of the square, typically lower right corner of your WebEx screen, and type the word comment or the words "I would like to make a comment" in the text field, and make sure you send it to all panelists before you click the send button. If you called in, you can press *3 to raise your virtual hand and then be called on. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
That was garbled, but I heard that there were no responses. So yes, moderator, please do close the WebEx open open session. So with that, I would like to say thank you to everyone for the contributions on this particular item. We are now breaking for lunch. We return to the board meeting at 1:30 p.m. with a time certain for petition hearings. So thank you very much, and we are now recessed for lunch. All right. So wonderful. Well, with that, hello, my name is Katrina Salazar. I am the president of the California Board of Accountancy. I would like to welcome everyone back from the lunch recess. And we are now on the agenda item for petition hearings. Before we do begin, I would like to ask our board relations analyst, Ms. Rebecca Reed, to document our roll call.
Nancy Corrigan.
Nancy Corrigan, present.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Present.
Dan Jacobson.
Here.
Christian Lotta.
Present.
Tony Lynn.
Present.
Ariel Pay.
Present.
Joe Rosenbaum.
Present.
Katrina Salazar.
Present.
Michael Savoy.
Present.
Yen Tu.
Present.
And Evangeline Ward.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. So with that, the first petition hearing is Mr. David Bruner, and I would like to welcome our administrative law judge to introduce himself and move forward with proceedings.
Thank you. Thank you, President Salazar. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, Mr. Bruner, are you here? Okay, you can go ahead and take a seat there. We're not on the record yet, but I just want to go over some brief ground rules just so you have some idea of what the hearing will look like. Let me just confirm that the other petitioner, Mr. De Benedetto, are you here as well? Okay. As I said, we're not on the record. I just want to make sure that you can both hear it. So my name is Sean Gavin. I'm the administrative law judge from the Office of Administrative Hearings who will preside over this matter. I don't decide anything in this case. That's up to the board. I just make sure that the hearing runs smoothly. So once we go on the record, I'll identify myself. I know we just established a quorum, but I'll establish a quorum on the record for each petition. So I'll just kind of call roll as Ms. Reed did. And then once we get into the actual petition, I'll invite Mr. Dukar, the Deputy Attorney General, to present a brief overview of the license and disciplinary history and present the petition packet. Mr. Dukar, it's my understanding that you want to submit just one exhibit as the whole packet. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So the exhibit packet, which is this pages 1 through 123, that'll be all marked as exhibit 1. So Mr. Dukar will just orient the board as to the license and disciplinary history, present the petition packet, and then we'll turn it over to you, Mr. Bruner, to present any additional evidence you'd like to present. You can present evidence in the form of your own testimony. You can also call additional witnesses, and you can also submit additional documents if you'd like to do that. Do you have any additional documents that you'll be submitting? Okay. Mr. De Benedetto, the same will go for you when it comes time for your petition. If you have additional documents, it's good to make sure we know about it now so we can make sure everyone has copies, et cetera. That's why I ask. Mr. Bruner, once we go forward with your testimony, you'll have a chance to testify, after which I'll give Mr. Dukar a chance to ask you some questions if he wants to, and then I'll just go around the room for each board member, and each board member will have a chance to ask you questions as well, finishing with Mr. Jacobson on WebEx. That'll be the case for testimony you give, as well as any testimony of any additional witnesses that you'd like to call. Does that make sense? Yes. All right. Any questions about any of that? Okay. One other brief housekeeping matter. There are two speakers. There's one here and there's one here. We don't have a court reporter for today's hearing, so I'll make an electronic recording of the meeting and the petition. That'll go off, of course, for the closed session. But in the event that either party wants to get a copy of that recording, you would contact the board, who will contact OAH and coordinate that through a licensed certified shorthand reporter. All right. So I'll just confirm your consent once we go on the record for that electronic recording. Mr. Dukar, anything to take up before we go on the record? All All right, just give me one moment to get the recording started then. We are on the record in the matter of the petition for reduction of penalty and reinstatement of a restricted area of practice. This matter is being heard, this is the petition of David Bruner and David Bruner CPA Inc. This matter is being heard before the California Board of Accountancy. It's case number AC-2017-102, and it is OAH case number 2023-020182. My name is Sean Gavin. I'm the administrative law judge assigned to preside over this case. Can I take the appearances of the parties, starting with counsel?
Good afternoon. Ted Durkar, Deputy Attorney General.
Thank you, sir. And the petitioner, Mr. Bruner, you're here today without the assistance of an attorney, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
All right, very good. Let's just make sure that your microphone is on. I see the red light.
Yes.
Can you tap the button?
Yes.
Okay, terrific, much better. Before we went on the record, I explained the hearing procedure. I'll briefly explain that hearing procedure now so your record is complete. In a moment, I'll go through the board members to establish a quorum. I'll then turn it over to Mr. Dakar to present a brief history of the license and discipline and to present the petition packet. You'll then have a chance, Mr. Bruner, to testify on your own behalf, call additional witnesses, or present additional documents. After you testify, I'll give Mr. Dakar and then each board member a chance to ask you any questions. Once that's done, you will have a chance to make closing argument if you would like. Closing argument is a brief chance for you to summarize what you think the evidence showed and suggest what outcome should happen as a result. Any questions about any of that, Mr. Bruner? No. All right. And one housekeeping matter, as I explained off the record, the matter is being electronically recorded in the absence of a court reporter. I just want to confirm the consent, Mr. Dakar, for the Attorney General's office.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and Mr. Bruner, you consent to that?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Let's just go around and establish. We'll go around and establish a quorum. I'm just going to go starting farthest to my left. Ms. Hines.
Present.
Ms. Mata.
Present.
Ms. Corrigan.
Present.
Mr. Savoy.
Present.
Mr. Lin.
Present.
Mr. Rosenbaum.
Present.
Ms. Tu.
Present.
President Salazar.
Present.
Ms. Ward.
Present.
Mr. Pei.
Present.
And Mr. Jacobson. Mr. Jacobson, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just confirming your
And I'm
presence.
here.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. Those members constitute a quorum of the board. Mr. Dakar, anything to take up before we move forward?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, then you can proceed as you see fit.
Okay, thank you. I appear in this proceeding on behalf of the people of the state of California by authority of Business and Professions Code, Section 5115, and Government Code Section 11522, on this petition for reduction of penalty and reinstatement of a restricted area of practice by both David Bruner and his accounting corporation, David Bruner CPA Inc. What they are seeking is for the ability to do a test work again. My role in this proceeding is to assist the board members and Your Honor in fact-finding. This role is not adversarial, but is intended to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. I'm here to ensure the board and Your Honor have the information you need to make a reasoned decision. Turning to the evidence before us all, the board members and the petitioner have been provided with a copy of the same petition packet. It totals 123 pages, and they're marked DB-PET-001 through 123. This includes the notice of hearing that's at page 120, and the petition itself, the petition form, is at pages 5 to 12. I would like to start by marking the whole 123-page packet as Exhibit 1, and I offer it into evidence.
Mr. Bruner, do you object to the board considering those documents as evidence when they decide this case?
No.
Exhibit 1 is admitted.
Your Honor, I'd now like to provide a summary of the case.
You can proceed.
David Bruner received the CPA certificate number 73235 in 1997. His firm got its certificate in 2007. Their license history, if you wish to review it, is at pages 114 to 119. Both of them have had multiple brief periods in which the certificates were invalid because they expired for failure to submit renewal fees and or a declaration of compliance with CE continuing education requirements. These licenses have been through 2 disciplinary cases, an accusation in 2018 and then an accusation and petition to revoke probation in 2019 to 2020. I'll summarize those for you now. The 2018 accusation case was based on a failure to adhere to professional standards in an employee benefit plan, or known as ERISA audits, and failure to participate in peer review. The causes for discipline stated in the accusation were gross negligence and repeated acts of negligence, insufficient audit documentation for those ERISA engagements, audit reports not in compliance with standards, and then failure to comply with standards. That case was resolved in 2018 with a stipulated disciplinary order against both Mr. Bruner and his corporation that imposed revocation stay during 3 years of probation. And this probation included a permanent restriction from doing ERISA audits. That was the only aspect of a test that they were restricted from doing. And it required a supervised practice. In 2019, an accusation and petition to revoke probation was filed against Mr. Bruner and his corporation for failure to adhere to professional standards, gross negligence, and repeated acts of negligence in a review engagement that was completed in December 2018. Their errors in that engagement are at pages 80 to 81 in your packet if you'd like to take a look. But in their, this matter was also resolved by stipulation, and Mr. Bruner and his corporation admitted all the allegations in the accusation and petition to revoke probation. The stipulated disciplinary order added 18 months more of probation time and extended the practice restriction to cover all attest work. So they have a permanent restriction against doing attest engagements. And so this extension of probation kept them on probation through December 25th, 2022. It just came off of probation recently. They agreed and were ordered to pay $3,300 in costs owed from the prior case and about $2,100 on the second case. And the probation terms included, as I said, the restricted practice with permanent restriction from doing attest work. Let's see, I'm sorry, I repeated that. But in the turning now to the petition that Mr. Bruner has filed, he describes the most recent discipline that he received as a review engagement that was examined during probation and found to be deficient, which seems to be an accurate summary of what occurred there in 2019. In the petition, he discloses that he received a 3-year probation from the AICPA. However, the AICPA website shows that he was suspended for 2 years based upon the CBA's action. So what AICPA took action because CBA had, and I believe that suspension, 2-year suspension, was imposed retroactive to June 2020. So it would seem that that suspension is over. In response to question number 10 in the standard petition form, that question asks why the petition should be granted. Mr. Bruner claims that he went through an improvement plan to improve his review and auditing skills, working under Robert T. Dennis as that CPA's employee on audits and reviews since July 2020. So that permanent restriction doesn't require, I mean, that he's allowed to work on the engagements just under someone else. They can't go out under his name, is I believe how that works. He says that he has learned CCH Audit Accelerator software and has gone paperless on his attest work now. So that's a form of modernizing the way that he does his attest work, his attest engagements. And he claims that two CPAs, Pat Spafford and Michael Blanks, have worked with him on his quality control for his practice in general. In response to question number 11, which asked what work would he do if his petition, the relief that he's asking for, was granted, he says that he would continue to do business through his accounting firm and will work with Robert Dennis, continue to work with Robert Dennis on audit and review engagements. But I will note that if his petition was granted, he'd have the ability to work on them independently. Mr. Bruner submitted a worksheet and certificates covering 174 hours of continuing education from the period of July 2020 through September of 2022. Mr. Bruner didn't submit any reference letters, and there is no documentation from the CPAs he claims to have worked for and worked with in the last 3 years on attest engagements and quality control. So that concludes my summary of the facts in this case, and the petitioners do have the burden of proof, and once his presentation is done, I'll have some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jakar. Mr. Bruner, that takes us to your case in chief. If you'd like to testify on your own behalf, I'll have to swear you in. Alternatively, you can call additional witnesses first or instead of testifying. So which would you like to do? Do you want to testify on your own behalf or call other witnesses?
I don't have any witnesses. So I guess if I can elaborate, maybe.
Sure.
I guess that would mean I would testify.
Yes, sir. I'll go ahead and swear you in. So raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you'll give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay. You can put your hand down if you'd like. I'll have you state and spell your name so the record captures it clearly.
Okay. David Bruner. DAVIDBRUNER.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Brunner. This is your chance to explain in your own words what you think the board knows when it decides this petition. Please keep in mind that the board does have the petition packet and has had the chance to review it, so you don't need to repeat anything that's in it necessarily, and the focus is on rehabilitation. But with that said, you can proceed as you see fit.
Okay. Just elaborating, since June 3rd, 2020, which was the second disciplinary action, I have taken steps to improve my practices, to improve myself. My number one concern is always my clients, and working under Robert Dennis I have learned extensively from. With the auditing profession, the way it's becoming, it is single practitioners, which was what I was before doing auditing. It's very difficult, and I would never go back to that route. That working with someone else as a group or working with someone as a partner is the way I would go, because then it gives me to do better work and better for my clients and customers. And also with Pat Spafford and Michael Blankson, Pat Spafford down in Redland, Mike Blankson in Oakland, working with them on quality control, they have been very helpful, with me. I talked to them about letter of recommendation, and this is busy season for them, so I was not able to get any written documentation from them. And I have definitely worked to where I think I'm where I need to be for the restrictions to be lifted. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brunner. Anything else to add before I give Mr. Drucker a chance to ask you some questions?
No.
Okay, Mr. Drucker, if you have cross, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Bruner, could you give us a summary of your career and the type of clients that you've served?
I've been in public accounting since 1990. I got my CPA license in 1997. Worked for various CPA firms at different levels until I went out on my own in 2003. And as I said, full service CPA firm, have specialized more in the last few years just because how the accounting profession is becoming specializing in certain areas, but basically a full service CPA firm. And I have some employees and subcontractors work with me, and then I work with Robert Dennis.
All right, Mr. Bruner, given that you are a full-service CPA, why do you want to do a test work again after you twice got disciplined for work in that area?
The tax work is with TurboTax and everything. The tax work is becoming less and less. Merced is not a high income area where there's a lot of higher income taxpayers needing tax work. So the attestation helps to balance my work, and working with Robert, especially like summer work after tax season, the attestation helps to balance my work for the rest of the year.
Who supervised your practice after the disciplinary order, the first disciplinary order, took effect in June 2018?
I was I had the supervised practice, I think. So I was working under Pat Spafford for the supervised practice. I think that's what you were saying. Asking, sorry.
Can you explain why that supervision was insufficient to prevent you from committing negligence in a review engagement then later that year in 2018?
That was the first engagement. So Pat issued. So we were going over the report. He issued the review. He issued it as a failed. I was going back and forth with him before that. I was like, I don't agree, and so he was like, David, we'll just we'll do the next one, and then basically we'll do the next one, and it'll be fine. Well, then after he issued the fail, I went back and forth with him, and he reissued the report as a pass. So the report was reissued as a pass. Then the second one he did for me was a pass. The third one we was working on that when the state put the permanent restriction, so didn't want the reports anymore. But I believe that would have been a pass too. So I guess that was a mistake on my part that I was going back and forth with him, but then he did reissue the report as a pass that I provided to the board when I got it from him.
Why should the board members believe that you're now equipped to practice attestation work without violating professional standards?
I have, looking at I have taken extensive CPE classes. I have, working under Robert Dennis. I can get some, if I need to, I can get some documentation from him. I wasn't able to up to now. And through the steps I have taken, I believe I can provide my clients with a quality service and always protect their interests.
Would you be willing to practice attestation under probation or with a supervised practice requirement?
That would be a plan to get me back to where I would not have restrictions. So yes, I would be open to that.
All right, thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Drucker. Mr. Brunner, I'll now give the board members a chance to ask you any questions they might have, starting with the furthest on my left, Ms. Hines.
No further questions.
Ms. Bata.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hello, Mr. Brunner. I just wanted to ask, and if anyone in the room wants to point this out to me if I overlooked it, you were requesting reduction of penalty, but I don't think there was specific verbiage in your petition specifically identifying the reasons for that.
I may not have filled it out right. I just asking for the restrictions to be lifted. So I'm not sure. I think that it said that I'm supposed to mark both of those for the restrictions lifted. Maybe I didn't fill it out correctly.
This would what he wants is for the restriction from him doing any test work. His terms of probation from the second disciplinary action include a permanent prohibition against his practicing a test unless he petitions the board and gets reinstated to do that kind of work. So that's this proceeding.
Okay, so just to clarify, no reduction of penalties. What's being requested?
It's the terminology that is considered a reduction of penalty.
Oh, okay. Understood. It's not a numerical penalty. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you.
Yeah, and other types of petitions, they may be seeking to shorten probation period or be relieved of paying costs or an administrative penalty, but that's not what we have here. Here it's just a test restriction.
Any other questions? Ms. Corrigan?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Savoy?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Brunner, I'm a bit perplexed because you failed to get some letters of recommendation. Accountants are always busy. To write a real meaningful letter maybe takes 15, 20 minutes because this is something we look at and look for to show the work you've done under somebody else's supervision would qualify you to do it on your own. So I think part of my problem is you've come in here with no letters of recommendation talking about the work that they've supervised on your behalf. I guess that's not a question, that's a comment.
Okay.
You also mentioned that tax work alone would not carry you through on your own because of the lack of high income level people working in your area.
Well, okay, that may not have been the best terminology, but yeah, the tax, yes, okay, the tax work hasn't been enough.
So if you were allowed to go back and do a limited amount of attestation work, would you have to solicit new clients to do this work for, or the existing clients you have would allow you to do that type of work for them?
What I would do is working under Robert Dennis. He is expanding, so I would be working with him. I wouldn't be picking up any new clients. I would be working with Rob, probably through new clients he would pick up, but I wouldn't be soliciting or picking up clients for a while.
So you wouldn't be signing the attestation report as a CPA, is what you're saying?
I would be working with Rob and maybe higher level as in charge, but then it would be working under him with his firm, getting up to the point where I'm in charge and like signing the reports under him or for him, but with him, I guess, or with his firm, but not under my firm.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lin?
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, I would just have the same question or concern about the recommendation letters from my colleague next to me. It is normal, you know, recommendation letter. I agree with only 15 minutes. You know, it doesn't matter how busy the firm is. You know, normally the recommendation letter to me is like 15, 20 minutes, and especially is Mr. Berner working with the firm for a certain amount of the time. You know, so I think this is my question and my concern too. Thank you.
Do you want to pose that question to the petitioner, or were you just echoing Mr. Savoy's comments?
Yeah, I can echo it with too. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Lin. Mr. Rosenbaum.
Yes. Thank you. What is the current relationship that you have, the working relationship with Robert Dennis? Are you an employee or are you a subcontractor, an independent contractor?
An employee. I get a W-2.
Okay. And do you expect that that relationship will continue?
Yes, he likes me. It's working out well for both of us. Yes, I do not anticipate that changing.
Okay. And given your comment earlier that due to changes in the accounting profession that it's difficult to go out on your own, why do you seek to have your firm reinstated as opposed to just you as an individual?
With the restrictions, I would to do higher level work. I think working with Rob, it would make me more marketable without restriction. Rob can market me working with him better. I believe, and more so without the restrictions. I would be a more valuable employee to him.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Tu. Oh, yes.
No question.
President Salazar.
Thank you. I'm a little confused at part of your testimony, so I'm going to state what I think I heard and then ask you for some clarification. I thought I heard you say that you would be working as an employee and not signing reports for a while if your license was restrictions were removed. And so I guess my question is, did I hear that correctly? And what is for a while to you?
Working with Rob as an employee, I can see down the road where I'm in charge on an audit, working with Rob with his firm, signing the report as in charge CPA or in charge auditor under his firm. So I would be signing, but I would be signing. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly. Signing it under his firm. So not with my firm's name, but signing under his firm.
Okay. And then thank you for that. And then you had also mentioned a process where you received a fail and then I was a little confused. There was a fail that then was turned into a pass. Can you describe the process that led from that fail to a pass? It was a little unclear if that was an accident or there was a process that you didn't elaborate on.
Okay, that was the review report. The review report that triggered the extension. It was a research and development item that it was between expense and being depreciated, and Pat Spafford was like, well, you didn't do it correctly. We went back and forth. I said, well, I believe this is correct. But then he issued the fail. Then I went back to him with, okay, what about this? And he was like, okay, you're right, I didn't think about that. And then he reissued it as a pass.
All right, well, thank you very much. No additional questions.
Thank you. Ms. Ward?
Thank you. I just, one question to clarify because I missed it. You mentioned there was 2 disciplinary actions in the past, 2018-19. Only one of those led to probation, and probation just ended right now, December 22?
The first one imposed 3 years of probation, and the second one extended probation by 18 months.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Pei?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Bruner, I commend you for being here today, but I'm having a real hard time understanding why you're here because what I see is repeated failed compliance. So my question for you is, what are the reassurance for us and this sector of business to reassure your compliance, and what infrastructure have you put in place for yourself to make sure you comply?
Now I am working with Robert T. Dennis. I have Pat Spafford and Michael Blankson in place for quality control and review. So anything that, like my compilations, all of my compilations are reviewed. I having them review them before I send them out. So I am I'm putting in quality control and structure in place so that there would not be problems going forward.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Jacobson?
No questions, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Brunner, anything else you'd like to add on your own behalf?
Like I said, I have, I believe I have taken steps on improvements since the disciplinary action, and I believe I'm at the point where I can have restriction lifted and be an asset to my customers and clients. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let me just go around the room one more time just to make sure that any board member questions didn't spark any new questions for other members. Mr. Jakar, any follow-up questions?
No, Your Honor.
All right, and then I would invite any board member who has a question to speak up. Oh, Mr. Rosenbaum.
Yes, given your recent answer about your current reviews and compilation engagements,
okay.
You indicate that Pat Spafford and Michael Blanks would provide quality control. Does Robert Dennis also provide quality control since you are issuing them under his firm's name?
Yes, extensively, because I'm working with him and on the audit. So yes, extensively. This is in addition to Robert, on my compilation and just like internal control in my practice, just improving my practice. So this is in addition to working with Robert and the training and the quality control I have from him. So this is in addition to that.
I see. And just to be clear, any of these review or compilation engagements are being done under the firm of Robert Dennis?
Review and audits. Compilations is not under restricted practice, so I am doing compilations, but Michael Bankson is reviewing them, reviewing all of them that I do. And my last peer review, which was compilation based, I got a pass.
Okay, and so when you do compilations on your own, as opposed to under Robert Dennis, you are doing this outside of the employment of Robert Dennis. Is that correct? You're doing these on your own?
Yes. Under my practice, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from board members? All right, seeing none. Mr. Brunner, you do have a chance also to make closing argument if you would like. That's a chance for you to summarize what you think the evidence in the case showed and suggest what outcome should happen. If you'd like to make closing argument, you can do that now.
As I said, I have, I believe I have taken steps for making improvements. I do understand what you're saying on letter of recommendation. When I submitted the package in January, I must have misunderstood, but my understanding was I couldn't bring anything else after I submitted the packet. That would have given me more time to get the letter of recommendations. So that was an error on my part. I thought the instruction was I couldn't submit anything after I submitted the package in. And so I do understand what you're saying on the letter of recommendations, but I put people I'm working with, a team together that I believe is to give me very good quality control and be an asset to my customers and to the community. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And just confirming you don't have other witnesses to call or other evidence to submit, is that right?
No.
Okay. If that's the case, then I'm going to ask whether the matter is submitted. And by that, I mean, are you satisfied you've had a full opportunity to present all evidence and make all argument on your behalf? Mr. Jakar, for the people, is the matter submitted?
Yes, Your Honor.
And Mr. Brunner, is the matter submitted?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, then this matter is submitted. The case is closed, and we're off the record for this matter. All right, thank you, Mr. Brunner. You can take your time and gather your materials. I think probably appropriate to take just a brief 5-minute break unless you want to push. Let's take a brief break. Do you want 10? All right. Before we go on the record, Mr. DiBenedetto, you observed one petition hearing already now, so you have some idea of how they go. Do you have any questions about the procedure?
No, not at all.
Okay. I'll need you to move your microphone a little closer just to make sure everyone can hear you.
Not at all, Your Honor.
Okay. Will you have additional documents besides the petition packet?
I do not. I do have a supplement that I did already submit, so I do not have any more.
Okay. Yeah, and Mr. Jakar, I have the original packet and then the supplement dated March 9, or at least the memo is dated March 9. Is that what the board members have as well?
Yeah, so it goes 1 through 101 in total.
Okay. And will it be your intention to submit that all as one?
Yes.
Okay, that'll be one exhibit then. And Mr. DiBenedetto, will you have additional witnesses to call?
I do not, Your Honor.
All right, just give me a moment to get on the record. Mr. Jakar, anything to take up before we go on the record?
No.
Okay. All right, we are on the record in the petition for reinstatement of revoked certificate of Joe DiBenedetto. This matter is being heard before the California Board of Accountancy. It is case number AC 2007-53. My name is Sean Gavin. I'm the administrative law judge assigned to preside over this case. The OAH case number on this matter is 2023-020183. Can I take the appearances of the parties, starting with counsel?
Yes. Deputy Attorney General Ted Durkar.
Thank you. And Mr. DiBenedetto, you're appearing today without the assistance of an attorney. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right. As I did for the other petitioner, I'll just briefly explain the process so the record is complete. In a moment, I'll go through and establish a quorum of the board members. Once I do that, I'll give Mr. Durkar a chance to present to the board members a brief license and disciplinary history, as well as your petition packet. After that, you'll have a chance to present additional evidence. You can testify on your own behalf, you can call additional witnesses, and you can present additional documents. You've notified us that you don't have additional witnesses or additional documents to present or to call, and that's okay, but I just want to let you know those are your rights. After you've testified on your own behalf, I'll give Mr. Durkar and then the board members a chance to ask you any questions that they might have. Any questions about that process?
No, sir.
All right. And let me just confirm this matter is being electronically recorded due to the absence of a court reporter. Let me just confirm the parties consent to that. Mr. Durkar, for the people?
Yes.
And Mr. DiBenedetto, you consent to that?
Yes.
All right, very good. Let me just briefly establish a quorum first. Ms. Hines?
Present.
Ms. Latta?
Present.
Ms. Corrigan?
Present.
Mr. Savoy?
Present.
Mr. Lin?
Present.
Mr. Rosenbaum?
Present.
Ms. Tu?
Present.
President Salazar?
Present.
Ms. Ward?
Present.
Mr. Pei?
Present.
And Mr. Jacobson?
Here.
Okay, very good. Those members establish a quorum. Mr. Durkar, you can proceed as you see fit.
Yes, thank you. I appear on behalf of the people of the state of California by authority of Business and Professions Code Section 5115 and Government Code Section 11522 for this hearing on the petition for reinstatement by Joe DiBenedetto. My role is to assist the board members and Your Honor in fact-finding. This role is not adversarial, but is intended to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. I am here to ensure that the board and Your Honor have the information you need to make a reasoned decision. The board members and petitioner have been provided with a copy of the same petition packet. The packet came in two parts, an original packet of 40 pages, and then a supplemental one with additional documents provided by Mr. DiBenedetto, which is pages 41 through 101. Those pages have been marked with JD-PET and then the page number 1 through 101. The notice of hearing is at page 38. The petition form itself is at pages 4 to 12. And I'd like to start by marking this entire set as Exhibit 1, and I offer it into evidence.
Mr. DiBenedetto, is there any reason you believe the board should not consider these documents when it decides this case?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 1 is admitted.
Your Honor, I'd like to provide a summary of the case now.
You may do so.
Mr. DiBenedetto received a CPA certificate number 73278 in 1997. His license history is at pages 36 to 37 of your packet. His license was revoked by CBA in 2008, and this is his first petition for reinstatement. The underlying discipline arose from a criminal conviction in 2006. Mr. DiBenedetto pled guilty to 45 felony charges, including 1 count of grand theft, 21 counts of falsifying records, 21 counts of fraudulent computer access, and 2 counts of filing false tax returns. The charges resulted from his actions while serving as the CFO for Mastercraft Homes, a home builder. An accusation was filed against Mr. DiBenedetto in 2007, alleging unprofessional conduct for his conviction of crimes substantially related to the qualifications, functions, or duties of a CPA, and there was also a willful violation count in that accusation for his failure to report the convictions to CBA within 30 days as required. Mr. DiBenedetto didn't file a notice of defense to the accusation, and his license was revoked by this board's default decision in 2008. Mr. DiBenedetto reports that his career started with 5 years of audit work at Arthur Andersen and Ernst & Young. He then worked as a CFO for 2 different home builders. Mr. DiBenedetto explains the basis of his discipline. This is in the petition. He explains the basis of his discipline as convictions for grand theft and failing to properly record events in company books and records. In his answer to petition question number 9, Mr. DiBenedetto admits to his crimes and says they were wrong and selfish. I'll quote from it. This is at page 12 of your packet. I regretfully took advantage of the lack of controls that were in place, and it was my duty and responsibility to protect the company. I used my CPA license to give them false protection, and I take full responsibility of my actions. Unquote. The narrative that Mr. DiBenedetto provided with his petition says that a civil action was brought against him for the theft having occurred in 2002. He claims that he paid a total of $275,000 in restitution to his employer from which he took money. And then several years later, he was charged with crimes and pled guilty and was sentenced to 1 year of home confinement in 2008. In his petition, Mr. DiBenedetto explains throughout pages 9 to 12 why he believes his license should be reinstated. I would summarize it as he says that his license was revoked 15 years ago, and since then he and his wife have put 10 years into building a business of 8 bakeries. They grew this business to a $3 million a year operation. And he reports having done all the tax filings accurately on time, and that he has learned the importance of doing the right thing and acting honorably. He reports that he's currently working as a financial analyst and hopes to grow within the company. He says that if his petition is granted, he plans to get more involved in accounting, but does not plan to return to general public accounting. Mr. DiBenedetto says he's motivated to get his CPA license back to show his young son that he recovered from his previous dishonest actions. Mr. DiBenedetto submitted considerable documentation. This is the supplemental filing that's pages 41 through 101 about his business activities, and the documentation includes a contract for one of his restaurants called Creme de la Creme Cafe to provide meals for jurors at the federal courthouse in Riverside, and then letters from the court from 2020 annual letters through 2022 about extension of that contract, indicating that he's successfully performing it. There's documentation of his restaurant's participation in Riverside County's Great Plates program, which involved meal delivery to vulnerable seniors during the pandemic in 2020. He also included a 2017 agreement with the city of Riverside for Creme de la Creme Cafe to operate for a 5-year period in the county administration building. He also included his request for proposal to the city, which details the extent of his operation at that time, which included 6 bakery restaurants, throughout Riverside County, and a company history going back to the first restaurant opening in 2009. I will note to the board and your honor that it doesn't appear that Mr. DiBenedetto has undergone any education in the field of accounting to get ready to re-enter the profession. And Mr. DiBenedetto has not submitted any letters of recommendation concerning accounting. So that concludes my summary of the evidence, and Mr. DiBenedetto has the burden of proof. And then once his presentation's done, I will have some questions for him.
All right, thank you, Mr. Durkar. Mr. DiBenedetto, now is your chance to testify. If you'd like to do that, please raise your right hand so I can swear you in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you'll give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. Can I have you move your microphone a little bit closer?
I do.
Maybe a little more?
No, okay. How's that?
I think better.
I'll speak louder.
Okay. All right. You don't have to ask yourself questions. Instead, you can just explain in your own words what you think the board should know when deciding this case, and you can do that whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to start out saying that, I haven't been in the accounting field for 15 years plus, and listening to the recap of my past, it destroys me inside. I mean, the things that I've done, and like I said, I think about my son. My wife's pregnant next month, and I have another son coming. I don't want them looking at me like a criminal, and I have to try to fix that. It would have been really easy for me to go on with my life and never come back here and never face you guys. And I felt it was, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to speak from the heart here because it's something that I just need to do for me. What I'm trying to do here is I'm not looking to go back into public accounting. I'm looking to get back, and I am actually working right now for an accounting firm. I'm sorry, not accounting, a real estate firm that I report to a 30-year-old that has a master's, doesn't have a CPA, and I look back and I look at the value of a CPA and what I did to ruin it. I mean, because these people come out of school and they don't know much. And I try to come in as a 53-year-old, and I'm looking at they look at me like the old man. And the value of the CPA is so huge, and I've lost that, and I've ruined that for myself. So that's why I'm here. Anyway, back on target here. What I'm trying to do is, after the actions, I worked for two home building firms. I sat down with both those owners and explained exactly what had happened in my past. At that point, I wasn't convicted. It was 45 checks. Everyone got a conviction. So, it looks like a huge thing, but I went through both those with both the two owners, and that was with Lennar as well as Frontier Homes, Kay Havanian. So big home builders. So from there, when the home building crashed in about 2005, with my financial background, my wife's, and I don't need to, kind of re-go through here, but my wife has 10 years of Cheesecake Factory. We decided to start a business. We built it from the ground up. And it's with the education that I've received through, Cal Poly Pomona, as well as, working with Ernst & Young and Arthur Anderson, is what was able to make me successful. And that's kind of what I want to highlight here, because, some of these people come in and they think, oh, I'm not going to get a CPA, it's too hard to get now and all that. It really should be something that people strive for. So with that, we built 8 separate bakeries from the ground up, and that's working with the cities and the counties and all that. It's that interaction that I had with the cities is what got us our contract with the city of Riverside. Vince Ugirmi, who's the deputy director of real estate in the city of Riverside, is the one that approached us and said, hey, why don't you put in a request for a proposal, RFQ, I guess. And we did that. And I know one of the questions might be about the letter of recommendation. I didn't even decide to do this until December, when, with COVID, we lost 3 of our bakeries because we were doing wedding cakes and anniversaries and things like that. And we had no social gatherings. And so we were only open 3 days a week. We basically lost 3 of our bakeries just because we couldn't survive. And the landlords came after us for full rent, and they won. So things got tough. I decided to get back into the accounting world. And then when I started working with this group of young, kids, I guess, I don't know what to say, but younger generation, I'll be politically correct. It's really hard for me to come in and with all my knowledge and get dismissed, and it's like, and I think that CPA behind your name validates that, and whether or not I'm awarded that chance to ever get that back, that's what I'm trying to do. If I go back to a real estate company, I work for a CFO position, I want people to know I have this education. I have this. And, I'm not going to justify what I did. I mean, what I did was terrible. But I think in my 15, 20 years, I've learned the right way. The Great Plates program was something Governor Newsom did that we got on and to help senior citizens. I was actually the driver on those programs, 10-hour days, driving to these people, getting to know people. And, when they're happy over getting an extra drink as opposed to stealing $100,000, there's a different vibe to that. And it's something that, it's not justifiable. So I don't know, I think I'm going off on tangents here, but anyway, where we are now, we have a contract with the U.S. District Court. We have a contract with the City of Riverside, and we have active accounts with them. So other than that, I think I explained why I want to do it. It's really for my children, so I can go to them one day and say, I will have to explain myself to them one day when they're, he's only 9, so I have a little time. But I want to be able to get to the point where did I learn my lesson, and do you feel like I learned my lesson? So I'm hoping the actions of the last 15 years has proven that to you. I didn't do any continuing education. I am totally open to doing that. So if this was a time period where you said, fine, we can do it, it's going to be a year, I have plenty of time. So I will do the continuing education. So I think that's kind of where I'm at.
All right, thank you, Mr. DiBenedetto. Mr. Durkar, any cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. DiBenedetto, your criminal activity occurred about 20 years ago when you were a company CFO. How much financial injury did you cause the company or the companies?
I think the total was close to $250,000. I actually paid more than that in restitution, but it was about $250,000.
Okay. And you answered my next question, which was, did you repay the entire amount?
Yes. Yeah, okay. Plus attorney fees.
And trustworthiness and fiduciary responsibility are touchstones for the accounting profession. Please explain why the board should trust you to bear the CPA title again.
Like I said, it's really hard to judge myself since it's been my wife and I, so it's really not a good justification. I haven't injured anyone or anything like that. But I will tell you, at my current employer right now, they are doing some bad things, and I'm actually working with the Department of Justice on helping that come to light. That is just developed, so I don't really have any names or anything I can share with you, but I will tell you that certainly in the next month or so, that's going to come to light. They've asked me to stay on because my first gut feeling was, okay, let me just get away from this situation, and they've asked me basically to stay on to help them. So at this point now, I don't feel like if you're not paying payroll taxes or you're not doing fraudulent tax returns, I can't be involved in that. I'm at the point now where I'm too old. You can't be dishonest to people. You got to look after the people's well-being. So over the time, I probably have employed 300 people since then with the 10 bakeries, and you got a lot of part-time people, a lot of kids. There's a fiduciary responsibility there to make sure that they're paid properly, that their overtime's paid, their sick time's paid. Never had a complaint. So other than that, hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. And then I'm a little unclear about the nature of your present work. Tell us the last time that you feel you worked as an accountant. I understand you haven't been a CPA since 2008, but have you done what you consider to be accounting work since then?
Yes. So in 2010 to about 2014, I worked for a attorney firm called Snell Wilner, and I was their forensic accountant. So what they would do is they hired me. It was actually the same company that originally sued the company that I worked for. And they brought me in to do forensic accounting. So what they would do is they would get a lawsuit, and we had a $2 million lawsuit, and the people would say, oh, I have no money to pay. They would bring me in to do the forensics. So I'd go through the bank accounts, all that. I did that for about 4 years. And that was during the bakery items. Since then, I started this November, like November 1st, November 3rd, doing consulting. I did due diligence projects for CB Empire Properties. So what I did was I'd come in, they'd look at properties, I would put a package together, financials, things like that. They liked my work. They asked me to join them full time. I started with them the first of this year. So it hasn't been a very long time, but I am still with them. They gave me a title of assistant controller because I do have a person above me, a vice president of finance and operations.
All right, thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Durkar. I'll now turn it over to the board members, starting with the furthest on my left. Ms. Hines, any questions?
Yes, thank you for coming in. I know that this is not always an easy thing to do, and it can be a bit intimidating to face a board and to hear the things that you've done, spoken out loud. So thank you for coming to talk with us today. So you talked about having done some work that is related to the accounting practice, even though you haven't practiced as an accountant. You didn't share any information about continuing education. Is that right? In the packet?
Right. I have not done any.
So can you talk to us about how you have stayed abreast of the requirements and the standards and the changing, nature of the accounting practice over the years in the work that you've been doing without having taken continuing education?
Yes. Well, the work that I did was more of agreed upon procedure. So it was very tailored to what they needed. So basically, they would say, okay, take this bank account and look for this. So it was more of a AUP, I guess it would be. So I didn't really, to answer your question, I haven't kept abreast to it because I was running my own business. I was running, doing our own taxes, doing our own financials, things like that. If I do get my CPA license back, reinstated, whatever I need to do to bring it back up to speed, I will do that.
All right, thank you. Ms. Plata?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a couple of questions. First, at the time that you took those actions that required discipline, what was the motivation for that? I know you referenced greed in your petition, but have you since then identified a specific cause for those actions?
I think it was simply overreaching. I had a employment agreement that was supposed to pay me 100% of my salary. And, and there were instances that I took it on myself to pay myself. And I justified it back then. I was 30 years old. I was this dumb. And, it was just, like I said, there was no, if I can go back now and say, I should have just went the legal route and sued them for not paying me, not taking it on myself to do it.
Thank you. And my second question was, since that time, you did mention that your perspective has changed maybe after serving the community during COVID, after having children and wanting to show them and teach them to be people of integrity. Is there anything else you would like to add as something that changed then versus now?
No, I mean, I think anything else would be just an excuse. I mean, honestly, I mean, it was just something that, you know, when you're young and you're making good money, and it's like enough's not enough, and it was just a bad way of thinking. That's all I can say.
I appreciate your honesty. Thank you.
Ms. Corrigan?
No, my questions have been answered, but it is honorable to be here and try to straighten out things from the past, and I do appreciate your being here.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Savoy?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll echo a point that I brought up with the previous petitioner regarding letters of recommendation. It seems that you've run a very admirable life in the 15 years or so. I think it would have been very helpful for us to get a few letters from those people that you've done good things for. My real question is, if we are to give you your license back, would you have any objections to a restricted license that doesn't permit certain things, such as a test work or other things of that nature, since you said you're really more concerned with having those 3 letters after your name?
I would agree to that. I don't see myself going back to public accounting.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lin?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a question, but I don't know who I should ask from the AG. Can I ask the AG?
Sure. Well, I guess it depends on what the question is.
Okay. So I have from my guideline of the nature and gravity of the offense, we were mentioned it about the damage was 250,000. I would like to see what degree of the nature and gravity of the offense, for.
I'm not sure what you're asking. What I think the gravity of it?
How deep is the? To me, I mean, in your experience, this is how big is the case to the criminal case for this for the 250,000 is a big amount? Or?
In my opinion, I think that's life changing, that money for people, and I think that that's a huge case. I mean. This was over a 4-year period. We had it up very quickly. So, but yeah, I think this is nothing that you can just explain away. I mean, that's like I said. This is why it's very difficult for me to be here, because I would have easily could have went the rest of my life and never came here to face my foes. I guess if that's the right way to say it. But yeah, the gravity. I think I look at it as very heavy.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rosenbaum.
Yes, just a quick question. You had mentioned some of the work you'd done. You characterized it as AUP or agreed upon procedures, but you didn't really have an engagement letter specifying agreed upon procedures.
No. It was the attorney. The attorney that was going after Mastercraft was actually working with me for my case. It's all convoluted, and I don't want to retry the case here. But
no, you've answered the question.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that it was unclear as to whether you were just characterizing it that way or that you had done agreed upon procedures.
He would send me an email and say, "Okay, Joe, I need this, and this done. Can you do it? Here's the hourly rate," and that's all the email said. So yeah, it wasn't an engagement letter.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Tu.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't have any questions. All my question has been asked.
Thank you.
Thank you. President Salazar?
No questions.
Thank you. Ms. Ward?
I don't have any questions, but I don't know if it's right to say congratulations on your other business. That's amazing.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, but no other questions.
Mr. Pei?
Thank you, Your Honor. First off, I'd like to commend you on the community service for the seniors, because I am heavily involved in that. I know what it takes. It's not easy. So first I'd like to do that. But I have a couple questions here for you. My first is I do know what it takes to run a business, and the growth you had to 8 businesses and back down to 5 is a very huge undertaking. Now for Congress, we have 5 businesses left. Now you have 2 municipal accounts in running that business. That's a 24-hour-a-day job, which I do know. I mean, time commitment, like why are you working as an analyst for a real estate agency is one question. And the second question is, if there are some types of CE recommendations that come from here, how are you going to manage that time? Because 8 business and 2 big municipal accounts is a huge undertaking. That's basically no sleep and you have a family.
Well, to answer your first question, I was getting tired of working with these 15, 16-year-old kids that I'm monitoring their bathroom breaks and when what the discounts they get and all this stuff. And I know it's part of the business, but I felt like I have a brain here that I've been trained to use at a higher capacity. So my wife and I decided that our staff has been with us in the one spot has been over 7 years, and the other one's almost 6 years. So we have longevity with our employees, which says a lot there too. We got to the point where we have enough controls in there that what I've learned through internal controls, I use ADP, I use cameras, I use anything I can to help them manage themselves. And my wife does still go in. We'll see what happens in 2 months when the baby's born, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But right now she's overseeing that. And so it was more of just kind of from my own stimulation of my brain. And, and I'm always working. So when I sit home for too long, I get stir crazy.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Jacobson?
Excuse me, but what was the work that you were doing with delivering food? Please.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's called the Great Plates Program. And I believe it started with Governor Newsom started that here in California. So it started for Riverside County. It actually started in June. We were able to get in July, and it was no easy task to get in. Only 52 restaurants in all of Riverside County was able to get in. And with that, what we did is we had to prepare 3 meals a day for the seniors. And we were allowed to deliver it in 2-day increments, but we got up to 100 customers at that point. We started out with 6, and what happened was we kept getting referrals from other seniors, and when we ended in December, we were at 103 or something like that, 102, somewhere around there.
Thank you. What are the 2 courts that you service in Riverside?
It's the Central District Court, also known as the Bankruptcy Court. That's where all the bankruptcy proceedings are.
So it's a federal court.
That's a federal court. And the other one is, it's not a court, it's the city of Riverside. It's the EDA, who we signed a contract with.
What does EDA mean?
The Economic Development Agency. I believe it might be in the contract.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Any other questions, Mr. Jacobson?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. DiBenedetto, anything else you'd like to add on your own behalf before I give the board members one more chance?
No, I think I feel pretty good with how what was said.
Mr. Durkar, any final questions?
No, Your Honor.
All right, and any final questions from board members? I see Mr. Savoy has a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed this before. You had mentioned that the current employer has been doing some wrongdoings. Was this part of a whistleblower that you might have called it in, or I want to understand that first before my next question.
No, I was not the one that initiated the call. A former employee called it in. I did call the EDA. I did file a formal report with the EDA, which is one is state and one is federal, one is state. And what I was told that the state is 3 years backlogged on investigations. So when the Department of Labor called me, she called me on a 3-way call with the former employee. And so that happened on Wednesday. And so they're actually coming to the office on Monday but they wanted, and I told them I was out of town here, and she said, just let's hold off till you get back.
So you said they asked you to stay on to assist in them cleaning up their mess. Are you concerned at all that any of this would blow back on you, having a bad history?
You know, it may, but I'm not at the point where, you know, like I just entered the job market. And yeah, granted, I don't want to enter the job market and be a whistleblower, but in the same sense, if I got to pick a path here, I mean, if I'm trying to be a CPA, do I do the honorable thing, or do I go back to my old ways and go, okay, just pay me more? So I decided to do the right thing. And if I get terminated over it, I get terminated over it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Savoy. Any final questions from board members? Yes, President Salazar.
Thank you. To sort of follow along the timeline you just referenced, can you clarify how long you have been with the said employer you're referencing?
Yes, I started in November as a consultant through December 31st. So I've been an employee since January 1st of this year. So going on almost 3 months.
Great, thank you. And then my only other question has to do with sort of the supplemental packet. You know, I guess the question I have is, how do you view, there's a lot in here, how do you view the inclusion of the particular piece about Great Plates? Is that sort of indicative of your business success, or are you holding that out more as a community service?
More of a community service. I mean, that's kind of what I was trying to do, because it was a dual purpose. I mean, obviously we got paid for the program, so that kept our doors open. We were able to keep all employees employed, which was the goal. Without that, we probably would have had to shut down. But on the same side, the big picture was we were feeding these people that couldn't get out of the house. I mean, I would get to know these people, these 70, 75-year-olds, that they would look forward to my knock at the door. And that alone was just something that just felt good.
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from board members? All right, seeing none, Mr. DiBenedetto, let me just confirm you don't have other witnesses or other documentary evidence to submit. Is that right?
I do not, Your Honor.
All right, that'll conclude then the evidence portion. You do have the right to make a closing argument if you'd like. So if you'd like to do that, you can do that now.
Like I said, I just came here to be truthful, and I respect any decision you guys come up with. You have to look out the best interests, what's good for California. I mean, so I came here, you know, and put everything on the line. You know, I just kind of told you I didn't hold anything back. You know, honesty is the best policy, you know, and it took me a long time to learn that, but I'm here with it. So hopefully, you believe me, and I can get my CPA license back and bring value to the community. And because what I see out there, the quality out there that's running some of these companies shouldn't be running companies. And that's another chapter. But anyway, so that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you, Mr. DiBenedetto. I'm going to ask in a moment whether the matter is submitted, and by that I mean, are you satisfied you've had a full opportunity to present all evidence and make all argument on your behalf? Mr. Durkar, for the people, is the matter submitted?
I'd like to make a closing statement.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that from a public protection standpoint, that it is of concern that it's been a long time since Mr. DiBenedetto practiced public accounting, and that he hasn't taken any professional education courses to refresh his knowledge or get ready to start work as a CPA again. And while he says that he doesn't plan to do public accounting, certainly when he has the license, it'll enable him to do that, to pursue any such opportunities that he has. So if his petition were to be granted to protect the public and specifically any future clients, his reinstatement could be made subject to his completion of education requirements. You could also consider whether Mr. DiBenedetto should be required to take and pass the CPA exam. That is an optional term of probation. So another thing too, if you deny this petition and you believe that it's appropriate under Business and Professions Code Section 5115, you can specify that his time to repetition is between 1 and 3 years. It just doesn't have to be for just 1 year. You have that option as well. So with all that said, I believe you now have all the information that you need to make a reasoned decision. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Durkar. Mr. De Benedetto, if you'd like to make any closing remarks in response to that, you can have that chance as well.
Like I said, if I have no objection to doing the continuing education, I understand that is a requirement. I'm not asking for you to say a CPA license without being educated, you know, with continuing education. So I absolutely believe that I should do that. I'm a little leery on retaking the test because, you know, I did it once already. I passed it. And to subject me back to doing that, you know, a lot of that's almost feels like it's making that mountain really high for me. And so, you know, I would hope that you don't require that.
All right, thank you. Now I'll ask whether the matter is submitted. Mr. Durkar for the people?
Yes.
And Mr. De Benedetto, is the matter submitted?
Yes.
All right, then the matter is submitted. The case is closed and we are off the record.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll turn it back over to President Salazar for board business.
I appreciate the prompt and the reminder. Thank you, petitioners. Thank you, board members, and thank you, Judge Gavin, for that. That concludes the closed session. We are now moving, I guess, petition.
That was open.
Right. Yeah, I know, but we're going into closed session now. So with that, we're moving into closed session. So we can absolutely take a 5-minute break.